Here we are with another chapter in which we see more northern law. What do you think of it this far? What do you think of Brandon and Vial? See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Brandon 3. He swung his axe above his head and in a mighty swoop he attacked his opponent. The thrill of the fight sending ripples of strength down his spine, in his muscles, making him feel alive. Sir Blackfear dodged his attack, paring the edge of his axe with his great sword. The man wasn't as tall as him, but he was leaner and quite fast, though he was not his match with this particular weapon, even if Brandon would like one day to best him his axe against his spear and not axe versus sword. Selhino smiled between his panting as they came closer, their weapons drawn together as they tried to overpower one another. Brandon smirked wolfishly at his good brother, finding in him the only opponent brave enough to fight him, even in a friendly spar, battling against his great axe. Brandon was good with ice when he used it, though nothing was as good, felt as right as the feel of his great axe in his hand. Well, nothing a part of a Vial. The moment that, as a boy snooping around the armory, he had found the old great axe, he had known that it was right, made for him. For a Vial he was coming to feel the same very way. He had felt drawn to her from the very beginning, and though they still did not know each other well, Brandon knew deep inside that she had been designed for him. Ready to yield, yet, he wondered jokingly. Selhino gave him a smirk right back, despite his darker-than-coal skin and his eyes being over 3 tones darker than a Vial. When his good brother smirked that way, he was reminded of the way a Vial smirked every time she won a game of Sivas with him. Which was always, by the way, she was insanely good at that game. Not on your life. They moved as if on some accord and broke their stance, taking each a step back. A small crowd had amassed to watch the sparring match, and Brandon could see Ander Castle, Roderick's father, pointing out the moves each party was making. Lionel and Benjen were both present in the crowd too. His wife was notably absent, but Brandon knew where she was. Selhino swung his sword to the side, in a sweeping motion, and Brandon leaned back, his axe in his right hand, dodging the hit. From common accord they were avoiding the most dangerous spots, since they were using not blunted weapons. Which would earn him a good scolding if his wife knew of it. Come on, he jested, you can do better than that. They circled each other as animals, the wild wolf and the black dragon, and Brandon smirked. He could see why Aes had given his bastard son the name of Blackfear. The male line was extinct, and if someone deserved his own name, a great name, despite his unorthodox birth, it was this man. Brandon leaned back and lured Selhino to come forward. The man propelled to him, yelling and holding his weapon high. Brandon dodged the sharp end of the blade, felt its metallic bite against the skin of his face, just barely, though Selhino was dosing his attacks. Then he threw his axe from one hand to the other, grasping it tight in his left hand, hitting the handle of the sword in the process and knocking the weapon away from his opponent's hand. When Selhino's eyes bulged, he knew his good brother had understood his game. So taken he was by their spar that he had failed to notice that Brandon, a lefty, had changed his hold after having attacked him the last time to his right hand. Brandon smirked and held Selhino's left wrist in his right hand and proceeded to press the blade of his great axe against his neck, his good brother's right hand still up in the air with this sword fallen to the ground. Yield. Selhino rolled his eyes. Yes, fine. I yield, you win this round. Brandon smirked and let go of him as the crowd applauded. They shook hands. You big oaf. Selhino said, you are as strong as a giant, you are. Brandon's smile was bright and happy. You could pay me no better compliment, brother, he nodded, patting his shoulder for good measure, for even mountains must bend to giant's strength, he told him. Selhino rolled his eyes. As far as he was concerned, all the mythical creatures of which Brandon talked about were just that, myths and legends. Brandon knew that one day his good brother would be in for a big surprise, namely during the harvest festival, when finally it came, when all the people of the north, may they be children, giants, shamans, dwarfs or human, gathered at Winterfell to celebrate the end of winter. Winter is coming, House Stark's words recitated, and Brandon knew full well how important it was to remember that. Lyanna came closer, her bow in hand, and Brandon smirked. Despite her initial protests, his sister had grown rather fond of her archery lessons and had even thanked his wife in the end. Brandon knew Lyanna had her reasons to feel as she did. It was not that she didn't like his wife, though she had made her displeasure of her widely known, convinced as she was that a Vial would betray them. The root of her displeasure sat with the fact that she held no link to the north, or better yet, not a manifest link to it. The women of House Stark usually were either greensorers or healers, or both, like their mother, but Lyanna had not inherited a single one of their mother capacities. The male of House Stark were different. No matter how strongly they were connected with the land, they had to undergo an initiation in the Wolf's Wood. The North could either choose them as its protectors, at whatever degree it chose, or it could send them back as its son. Lyanna was Winterfell's daughter, and yet she was not a healer and not a greensorer. She also wasn't a man, so she couldn't undergo the initiation and bind herself to the North as a warrior as she desired to. The fact that a stranger, a southerner, could be a part of the rituals of House Stark and the North when the daughter of Winterfell was hindered to do the same made her feel like an outsider. He missed Ned in these moments. Brandon understood Lyanna but couldn't relate, as she often reminded him, since he had returned from his initiation, the chosen protector of the North with a direwolf in tow. Ned was different. He was quiet and kind, and he too felt like an outsider most of the time, which made him and Lyanna stick together as close as thieves. Benjen too loved Lyanna dearly, and yet he too couldn't relate since he was the best greensorer seen in the last century, maybe even longer, so connected to the gods that he had stared warging and greenseering at the same time he had started to walk. "Someone looks to be here for you, Selhino," he said with a smile as Lyanna came closer, a bit pink on her cheeks. Brandon rolled his eyes. He loves his sister, but she sometimes could be an hopeless romantic. Just as she could be so stubborn she'd rather arm herself and head into battle instead that into a knitting lesson. Lady Lyanna, he bowed slightly, and Brandon smirked, seeing his sister's cheek redden even more for a moment. "Sir Blackfyr, how many times must I tell you to call me Lyanna?" she admonished. "We are kin after all." Brandon almost choked on the gulp of water he was drinking. Oh, so when it was of convenience they were kin, weren't they? He mused, just in time to turn and see his wife descend the steps from the keep and to the training yard, looking puffed out with a murderous Lady Shara in tow. Oh, for the old god's sake! His wife, as always, looked a vision. She was clad in a simple woolen light purple dress with grey and blue inserts. She had braided her moonlight hair in two tresses weaved simply, one falling on her front and dangling to her waist, at which she had attached the dagger he had given her during their wedding, the other falling down her back, a couple of ringlets of liquid moonlight falling around her face and framing it gently. A bulky, fur-lined cloak was wrapped around her lithe form. He exchanged a look with his good brother as they watched Lady Shara shadow his wife's every step, trying and failing to convince her to stay inside. "You'll get sick in this weather if you stay in the wilderness for 3 nights, Lady Shara tried, but his wife didn't slow down until she was in reach for him. Brandon opened one arm and she stepped into his warmth, her fur-lined cloak bulging her so that she almost had difficulty moving without having to adjust it every few moments. "What seems to be the problem, my lady?" he whispered to her, pressing a kiss to the crown of her head. Her amethyst eyes became slits of purple as she looked at her friend. "Nothing much, new Harzokla Valeries," she told him. "Lady Shara is oversharing and over-worrying as usual. Are you ready to go?" His wife could be as sweet as the sweetest honey, but also as fiery as the fire in her house words. Propos, he ought to think his Targaryen mighty stupid, because despite her being sweet and caring there was fire and blood in her too. Only, Brandon though, now, as she stood in his arms, there was not only dragon in her, there was also wolf. "I am, my bunner man. Did you pack everything we might need?" They were ignoring the fuming lady in waiting on purpose, and Benjen rolled his eyes, trying to strike a conversation with the woman, trying to assure her they would be fine, that he had seen it. "I don't care what your herbs and magic have made you seen, my lord," she snapped. "You weren't there when her highness was ill." "I was. But if she is determined to be stubborn, then I'll have no other choice but oblige. But do not come to me to cry when she'll fall ill," she added, making an hasty courtesy and leaving. Avalia sighed. "You should send her back south," Selhino offered. "The north is not a fit place for her," he added. "She'll never acclimate here." Avalia sighed again. "I'd rather she just accepted it all," she said, "but this cannot go on forever," she added. "I am giving her time, in respect of all the years she served me, but if this does not end promptly I'll have no choice but send her back south." "Indeed." Selhino snorted. "I know she was a good friend to you," he offered, "but you forget she was doing her job. It wasn't a natural stricken friendship," he reminded her. "She was sent by your mother to your side. That does not stain the friendship we cultivated in the years that came after." Avalia protested. "I shall give her time, she just needs to acclimate." "She is welcome in the north," Brandon assured her, "as long as you wish for her to be. The day you have had enough, my bunner man, she's out of it. No questions asked." His wife nodded. She started to pass sometimes with Maester Wallers. I think he appeases to her southern tastes with his way of speech and behavior. Mayhap he'll help her to acclimate here just fine, she offered, though by her expression it was clear she wasn't so sure. Brandon knew his wife didn't entirely trust Maester Wallers, who she found creepy, but perhaps she was right and he would help her friend to acclimate to the north and its people. Brandon took her small white-gloved hand in his. Shall we go, my lady, he offered, and she smiled. Please, she breathed out, I am eager for a bit of adventure, my lord. Brandon smiled. And so a bit of adventure I shall give to you, my wife, he promised as they excused themselves and moved to the stables. His wife was kind and caring, easily incensed and stubborn as a mule, he had found, but she could also be adventurous, in a womanlike way. She didn't have perhaps the courage to ride into battle and fight, but she had the courage to stand back and see care for all the rest. To stay back and wait, it took the same amount of courage than riding headfirst into danger. He had not noticed before, but there were winterberries braided in her moonlight hair, a gift from Winterberry, who his wife had grown impossibly close to since the first time Brandon had introduced her to the children of the forest living not far away from Winterfell. He knew Avilia often spent long afternoons in the children's village, and Brandon could not be more happy about it than he was. Why Silverwave was not prepared? Avilia asked, frowning, seeing only his stallion being prepared. Brandon gave her a smile. Well, he said, I would have liked for us to ride together, my bannerman, he offered, but if it hurts your sensibilities. Her cheek reddened. My apologies, New Harzokla Valrys, she offered back, but will we be fine with only one horse, she muttered. We'll be fine, my bannerman, he promised, caressing her cheek and diving in for a kiss. I made this journey many a time, always alone and often on foot, he told her. We'll be fine. I promise. And I believe you. He grabbed her by the waist and lifted her off the ground, bulky cloak and all, setting her on the stallion as if she was as light as a feather, which she was. Young Lord Mondaly was thrice as big as his wife, and still Brandon had had no problem whatsoever to lift him off the ground and set him straight when he had called for the bedding ceremony. He adjusted her cloak around her legs she had both swung on the same side before mounting right behind her, swinging his cloak around both of them to keep her warmer still. He embraced her lithe form to his chest as he took hold of the rein. He turned to Roderick Castle, who had come closer to them. We'll be back in a couple of days, he offered. His friend nodded. Give my regards to you. Brandon nodded. Will do, he promised with a smirk, before setting off to their journey. As they were riding in the white great expanse of the north, they talked about their childhoods. Were you a terrible child? He wondered after she had recounted of that time she had sneaked away from her lessons. She already knew half of it by heart, and passed the guards and had gone in the streets of King's Landing. Her little adventure had costed her being grounded for months, but she had found her older brother, Roriger, singing in the streets with Sir Barristan Selmy as a guard, and had hanged out with them as the people of King's Landing watched their prince and princess. Roriger had not been particularly impressed by her little stunt, especially since every Targaryen was highly afraid for Avilia, who was still small for her age and of too fragile disposition. I was delightful, she protested. I was always dutiful and did what was asked of me, she defended, but sometime I just wanted to escape, to see. You were a happy child, he smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. I was, she nodded. It's surprising, really, she said, because my family is not the most happy there is. But I was a happy child, especially after Inez was born. They started laying a bit off me when he was born, the fourth son and prince. I know things got rough when Selhino was presented to court. My mother had known nothing of his existence until that point, and she learned father had a bastard son raised in secret to whom he bestowed the name of Blackfyr. She added she was furious. She added Blackfyr and Targaryens do not usually live in harmony. She was afraid Selhino would ask for my hand in marriage or try and unthrone his father and her sons. Brandon nodded against her head, so she went on. Imagine her surprise when Selhino unsheathed his sword there and then before the whole court, swearing his allegiance to his brothers and promising to never seek the throne for himself, she said, even more when he turned to me, freshly returned from Dragonstone, and bent the knee, offering to be my sworn shield. I appreciate his guts to do so, Brandon offered. Avilia nodded. Useless to say father was furious, she said. Roriger had yet to have an heir. Elia had borne him only Rhaenys, who my father complained smelled Dornish, and he was already seeking to find an alternative heir in one of my brothers, and to be sure he had also given Selhino that name so that he may one day, if it came to that, design him as his heir, and my brother had just thrown out of the window his careful planning. They haven't spoken since, she added. Not that Selhino is heartbroken over it, she offered. He can't stand our father much. He despises the way father treats others, especially women. He never forgave him for the way he casted aside his mother and then tried to use him. Charlotte was walking leisurely at their side and he pressed his massive, scarred snout against Avalia's hand in a show of comfort and she smiled sadly. "And you?" he asked. "How was your father to you?" "Distant, but good before I went away to Dragonstone, though I don't think he ever forgave me for not being enough for his sons," she said. "When I returned to court he was different. He would not let anyone close to him and he was prone to fits of anger," she added. "He made me afraid. I kept my distance as much as I could." Seeing how much this was wearing on her, Brandon changed tactics once he told her me and Ned decided to play a prank on Leia and Mother. He said, "Benjen was too little at the time, still a babe in her arms, and Leia was 4, I think." She was listening in rapt fascination. "So," he said, "we invited her out on the day of the name-a-day and prepared for her and Leia a small picnic," he told her. Her eyes were shining with mirth as he recounted her the story. "They ate happily and all, and we had prepared this snow trap using a branch of the tree under which we were eating, and Roderick was hidden with the cord with which he would move the branch and let the snow we had collected on it fall on Mother and Leia's heads." "You were a mean ace, you mean," she giggled softly, but Brandon went on. "Thing is, we were ready for it too. Ned gave Roderick the signal, but just in that moment Mother called us over incessantly and we couldn't refuse without giving away our cover, so we went to her hoping to stay close enough to not draw suspects but to be safe from the snow. Leia feigned being asleep and Mother asked me and Ned to carry her back inside. Needless to say, as we leaned down to do just that, Mother stood up and shoved us gently where she was sat a minute before, just in time for Roderick to move his branch and the snow fell all over our heads." He finished his tale with a boisterous laugh. Avalia giggled. "Serves you right," she said. "You had to be taught the hard way not to play pranks on your mother." "I can't tell you how long she laughed at our expenses," he added with a bright smile. Avalia smiled. "You poor boy," she cooed. "Your mother pranked you right back, didn't she?" She caressed his cheek and Brandon dove in for a kiss on her rosebud's lips. He had had her that very morning, just before breaking his fast in the Great Hall, and yet his need for her kept building and building, growing exponentially. He relaxed his hand on her waist, his palm big enough to actually cover her waist and her flat belly, the rough fabric of the dress tingling the skin of his hand as the kiss turned more passionate. He loved the feeling of her small, lithe body pressed against his, so little but that seemed fashioned exactly to be pressed against his so much bigger one. How she welcomed him so fully and wholly. It was as if she was the very north he inhabited. It looked like he could not get enough of her. Not for the foreseeable future, anyway. He had always been a man of great appetites, whether they be carnal or literal. And often he needed more than one partner to be satisfied enough. Avalia, alone and inexperienced as she was, managed to keep him enthralled and still coming back for more. It was as if she put an enchantment on him and Brandon was only too happy to oblige her every whim and desire. So taken he was by the passion running in his veins that his other hand traveled up her lithe body and found the laces of her corset, caressing the rim of her dress, leaving trails with his fingertips against the skin of her collarbone. "Perhaps we should stop," she breathed against his lips. "We are out in the wild and on horseback." Brandon pressed his forehead against her and smirked. "You are right, on horseback it won't do," he admitted, "but that tree does look comfortable enough," he offered. She frowned. "What are you talking about, Brandon?" she asked, his name falling from her lips as if a spell. Brandon smiled and jumped off his horse. He whistled soundly and Charlotte moved his impressive body out of the way, standing vigil far enough not to be a spectator, but near enough to be of help in case he was needed. He grabbed Avalia by the waist and lifted her off the horseback, bringing her flush against his body. "Someone could see," she protested between kisses as Brandon walked to the nearest tree, bringing her flush against himself and pressing her to the dark trunk of the tree. She moaned slightly against his mouth when he pressed himself against her. "We are well away from any youst road," he told her, his logic wearing down on her resolve to do nothing. "Besides, we have a direwolf keeping guard. We'll be fine," he promised. "Shara is going to kill you if you make me fall ill with even just a cold because you undressed me in this weather," she jested, and Brandon claimed her lips with his another time. "That just means I'll have to keep you warm or leave your clothes on," he said simply, and she whimpered the moment his fingers traveled to her leg, hooking it up to his hip and trailing beneath the fabric of her skirt and her high wool socks, to her inner tight and her small clothes. He pressed another fervish kiss to her lips, or perhaps both, he offered, diving in to kiss the porcelain skin of her neck, leaving open-mouthed kisses and love bits all along her collarbone. He moved aside her small clothes and dipped one finger in the heath of her core. She moaned, her arms coming to circle his shoulders and she held on for dear life. Brandon smirked against her skin. You sure you don't want me to stop? He wondered in jest, looking up to find her amethyst eyes lucid and murderous. He whispered, pressing a kiss to her mouth. I won't stop, my bunner man, do not set me on fire, he added, pressing a kiss to the corner of his mouth. It was her turn to be jesting. I thought you loved it when I set you on fire, she mocked him, and Brandon gave her a small pinch on the butt. I do, he told her, swallowing her yelp with a kiss, but only when you set me on fire, without spitting real fire on me, though if it is spitting that you'd like. Her cheeks reddened. He loved seeing her becoming all timid when his innuendos were too easily read. She swatted his shoulder. Less talk and more action, my lord, or your wife will be bound to think you are only big on talking and not. She never finished her sentence because Brandon fell on his knees and pulled her skirts over his head, starting to devour her. Useless to say, there was not much talking after that. They came together after Brandon brought her on the precipice of pleasure twice without going through with it, frustrating her and himself even further. Their love-making would have awoken a sleeping giant if there had been any in the vicinity. When they finally came down from the high brought from their joint pleasure, Brandon let her legs fall back from his waist, where he had made her hook them, and though he remained inside of her as long as he could, his blood roaring in his ears, his appetite for her sated for the time being, he relaxed his frame against hers and the tree trunk as she sagged against him, holding him up at the same time. He pressed a sloppy kiss to the skin of her shoulder, left bare since he had almost tore her corset open to get as much skin-to-skin contact as he could. She shivered. Brandon took a step back from her, lacing his breeches again, and when she whimpered at the sudden loss of contact he pressed a peck to her lips before piling his cloak on her too so that she may not feel too much cold. Rest a bit, my bunner man, he offered, leading her to a divelted tree trunk and letting her sit, Charlotte immediately at her side. Big and imposing as a horse, I will make wood for the fire. After a 1.5-day travel through the snow of the north they were finally reaching their destination, the stone village that stood mid-road between Winterfell and the wall, the Blade of the Father. Avalia was still pressed to his side when they entered the stone village, her amethyst eyes bulging out as she took in the immense structures. She had unbraided her hair and some of the winter berries she had intertwined with it had fallen off, but the majority of it had remained like droplets of ruby red in the moonlight curls. She looked as wild as the north, she looked like the north with her pale face and snow-white hair lightened by the moon. She was his. Where have you taken me, Brandon? She murmured. Charlotte, big as he was dwarfed by the buildings excavating in the side of the wall of the small frozen canyon that housed the Blade of the Father. It's called the Blade of the Father, he told her, and it is the nearest settlement of the giants who still live this side of the wall, he finally revealed. You have brought me to meet the giants. Though they lived only beyond the wall. Most of them do, he offered, but the ones more closely knitted with us still live this side of the wall, he said. They are the more civilized clans, the ones beyond the wall are more savage. Just as he was saying that an enormous, imposing shadow covered them, Avalia looked up and stilled in his hold. The woman stood a good 12 feet tall and was carded in furs, her hair were tight ringlets that spoked in every direction, and she moved so slowly that the earth had time to stop vibrating between one step and the next. Brandon smiled. He whispered in his wife's ear. Is you, he told her, she is the daughter of the chief of the Stone Clan, he explained. She is a sort of princess of giantesses, much like you, my bunner man. Lovely, she muttered. I feel even more minuscule, she offered. Brandon let out a roaring laugh. Do not worry, my bunner man. I shall protect you. You better, she said, holding on to him for dear life, or I'll come back from death to haunt you. As I said already, I'd be quite lucky indeed to be haunted by the most beautiful ghost ever. You are smooth, she conceded, but smooth won't save you. He pressed a kiss to her cheek and smiled. Don't be so fearful, my man, he told her. They are a bit primitive, maybe, but they are good. Avalia did not look to think the same when she saw Kahim calm, the said chief, eating a goat raw and still alive. Well, Brandon could give her that was certainly not a sight most fit for a lady. Kahim stood almost 15 feet tall, and sat on the stones. He was almost as tall as the wall they could see in the distance. Women, he told him, waving said goat in their direction in the old tongue. Brandon nodded. He said my woman, he added. Kahim smelled the air around them. Southern, he said simply. Smoke and snow, he added, probably commenting on her smell. Blood and fire, winter. Brandon nodded once again. She's a dragon, he told him. A dragon from Dragonstone, a dragon of old Valyria blood, he added. She is a dragon of moonlight. Snow, the giant said, waving the half-eaten goat. Once again, Winter Dragon. Brandon smiled. He said, winter is coming. The giant nodded. Death is coming, he said. Slumber is not eternal, he added. Brandon nodded, and Charlotte wrapped itself around them, offering silent support to Avalia, who was being studied closely by you and her sisters. The Starks will endure, he promised. The North will endure. The North remembers, Kahim said. She is not of the North, he told him, gesturing to his wife. Her people forgot, the children know. But she won't forget. Brandon did not know what Kahim was meaning, and in that moment you said, she looks pretty. She looked at him, pretty and small. Can she give you sons? Brandon almost choked on his own laugh. We hope so, he said. The old gods will decide. You sniffed the air around them and bended so that her head, twice that of Avalia, was the same high as his wife's. She looked in her eyes. She has beautiful eyes, the giantess said. They are a gift from the gods. Brandon turned to Avalia. She says you are pretty and that you have very beautiful eyes. He told her that they are a gift from the gods. Avalia looked touched by the compliment. Could you tell her that her hair are very pretty too? She asked. They look like made of water, like the deep waters of ponds. Brandon relayed her compliment, and you nodded. She is pretty and she is kind, she said. Does she have fangs, Wolfman? I have fangs enough for the both of us, he assured her. She has snow and winter berries in her hair. The children love her. You nodded and looked at Fallon, her red-haired sister, the Stars Diviner. She will give him stars, the red-haired giantess offered, to guide his road when his path darkens. Avalia looked back at him for a translation, but Brandon found he could give her none because Fallon took something out of her clothes, fishing it out and offering it to Avalia, who with a bit nudge on her lower back accepted the gift. It was a jade, purple and golden, its crystals shining, engraved to look like a butterfly on the stone side. It will bring you fortune, Dragon of the Moon, Fallon said, and you shall need it. After that, Brandon did not feel bad about leaving her alone with you and Fallon or their 2 children as he discussed the last bit of news with Kahim. Calm in his tent, just out of sight, but they could still see outside. Deserter, the giant said. Brandon nodded. He replied. Came all the way to the King's Road before he was caught, he explained in the old tongue. Awake, Kahim said. Death is awake. Brandon shook his head. I don't know, he said. He did not see the others he offered, but he heard chanting in an old language and the earth shook beneath him and winter looked him in the eye, he reported. Kahim nodded. Death is awaking, he said. Free folk is no longer safe. Wall. The wall will stand, Brandon promised Bran the builder. Make sure it would, he added. Did Fallon see anything of this in the stars? Kahim shook his massive head. She saw snow and death, he told him. She saw winter, but she did not see death awoken. Not yet, he added, but slumber is not eternal. Brandon nodded. You have to protect the giant, said. North choose you, he said. Then he gestured for Avalia, who was wrapped in Charlotte's body warmth and with a gentle snowfall swirling around her. Brandon had not even noticed it had begun to snow until that very moment. Choose her too, he added. Sons she will give the North, warriors to fight for it and to care for it too, but shadows close in on her, winged shadows as big as mountains, he told him. You must protect her. Brandon touched his amulet, the one she had attached to his neck the day of their wedding. I will, he promised. Kahim nodded. Winter is coming, he said in the old tongue, and Brandon nodded. He said. Winter is coming. Run along, Wolf, the chief said to him. The North will need you before this tale is done. Brandon felt the weight of his great axe strapped at his back grow even more as he left the enormous tent in which they had held that conversation. His steel eyes fell on Avalia and she smiled at him brightly. Her eyes were shining as the crystals of the jade Fallon had gifted her, the same shade of amethyst, and the burden seemed to lessen on him as the light of the flame of the small fire she was sat before danced on the porcelain skin of her face. Her light would guide his steps even in darkness. His Dragon of the Moon. Notes. Here we are. Hope you liked it. If you have any criticism to offer or suggestions to make, do feel free, because they might make this story so much better than it is. Hope to hear from you soon. As always, sending all my love, G. Chapter 9, Shara. Summary. Shara speaks with a relative she didn't know she had in the north, someone who shares her concerns about the princess and this mad match the king has made. What will they do? Will it work? Notes. Hello, how are you? I hope you are all fine. Here we are with a new chapter. Are you excited about it? I am for sure. So let's get on with it and see what you think of it. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Shara Hera knocked on the door and awaited. Enter, called the low, gentle voice of the Maester of Winterfell, so she did exactly that, opening the door of the Maester's solar just as he was leafing through ancient-looking scrolls. He was young and lithe, he had kind eyes and a gentle smile, and he was her sole refuge in this wolf's den. He was a Southern too, the low-born son of a Hightower girl, one of her cousins perhaps, and an Archer-Maester of the Citadel. So he was kin, and Shara could not be more grateful for his presence in Winterfell. "Lady Shara," he saluted with a small bow. "What can I do for you?" he wondered, his kind smile spreading warmth over her. These Northerns were cold, and raw and incomprehensible for her. She couldn't understand how Princess Avalia seemed to fit so well with them. They were exactly the opposite of the southern court Shara was sent to, completely different from the court in which Princess Avalia had been raised. She had lost count of how many times had Lord Brandon taken off with Princess Avalia on caring for her health. It must be some miracle from the gods neither Shara neither the princess could appropriately pray to without a September, that she had yet to fall ill, though her not having fallen pregnant yet could be because of the frequent excursions and the cold. Shara knew better than to think the princess and Lord Brandon's relationship to be purely platonic. She knew they laid together every night, even the ones of her courses, as if Lord Brandon truly didn't take any other woman to his bed. Though she knew, by the Maester himself, of how often Lord Brandon used to visit the brothels, of how often he laid with women, perhaps more than one in a time, and yet he had not fathered any bastard. He either was the most careful man alive, or he couldn't have children, which, if proved, could make their marriage null and make so that both the princess and her could return home, where they belonged. "I was just feeling," her whisper broke off and she shook her head. "Unherpeful," he guessed. "Did the princess send you from her side yet again, my lady cousin?" he wondered. There was no malice in his tone. Only the concern of her own blood. She nodded yes. She said she'd rather the company of some northern lady who came with her father for business. She added, "I start to believe she does not regard me anymore as her lady-in-waiting as she once did." Shara had been all that the princess had, once upon a time, her good sister too occupied with trying to fall pregnant with the children of the heir to the Iron Throne, her mother a world away. Shara had been her only friend and confidant, but since coming north something had shifted. Her silver princess no longer seeked her out or heard her heartfelt advice. She was growing distant, and Shara was sure she'd have her heart broken once Lord Brandon bored of her, as he was bound to do, being a man of such ravenous appetites as he was recounted to be. The Starks treated with respect even Sir Blackfyr, who had been considered nothing short of a bastard back in King's Landing, a bastard bestowed the royal name of Blackfyr by his father but void of the Targaryens' ambition that had led to the Blackfyr rebellion once before. "That cannot be true, my lady cousin," Maester Warlers said softly, gesturing for her to join him at his table. "I know that Princess Avalia trusts you above everyone else." He added that you are her closest friend and confidant. "I am sure that once the novelty of her marriage to Lord Brandon is consumed she will return to you. Do not fear, the young lord is not bound to be so single-mindedly attached to her for much longer. She does not meet his standards after all." Shara sent him a glare. "Oh no, my lady cousin," he hastened to correct, "the princess is more than what the lord deserves. More than this blasted north deserves," he added. "But the lord is unmannered, crude and uncouth, his taste in women, more so. The princess is too tiny, too delicate for his tastes." She looked at the Maester of Winterfell as he looked at her intently in the eyes. "She is a precious flower sent too far in the cold to survive without friends," he added, scanning her face. "She's lucky to have you, but I am afraid that when the cold sets, she will wither." "Oh, cousin," she despaired. "So for her friend what can we do?" she asked, concerned. So, she wasn't the only one who worried over her friend. She was sure her low-born cousin, despite the nature of his birth, would be her ally here. But she had been afraid that only she had maintained a cool head over the Starks, a group of mongrels ready to tear to pieces her beloved princess, scoundrels all of them, and their north. Her princess would wither here without her, but Shara would make sure that didn't happen. "I don't know, dear lady the Maester. I have yet to find a way to free her from the Winterfell's hounds," he said. "How far can I trust you, cousin?" he asked. "Are you ready to do anything, even something that may hurt her now, to make sure she's back where she belongs?" Shara leant over the table, grasping one of his hands, resting on the wooden surface, in both of hers. "Please, Maester, please," she begged. "I am willing to do anything," she promised, "anything to save my princess from this ugly fate." He grasped her hands in both of his now, his dark eyes sparkling. He was comely enough, and in the right light he could almost remind her of her brother, a Hightower in truth. "Oh, thank you, father," he said, glancing up. "Thank you, mother, maiden and crone. Thank you, warrior, smith and stranger, he added. I was afraid to be alone in my quest to save Princess Avalia from her fate. I feel so much better knowing she will also have you to look out for her. Yes, cousin, she promised, but what can we do? His eyes became cold and calculating, speculating as per tradition Princess Avalia should have given as a bride to one of the king's sons and heirs. Why did this not happen? Prince Roriger already has a wife, Shara explained. The Dornish, the maester said with distaste. She nodded. Didn't Prince Viserys or Baelor or Prince Inys show any regard for her? Inys did, Shara said suddenly. He is quite taken with Avalia, even composing rhymes and poems for her and declaiming them before all the court, she added. But he is almost 2 years her junior, she said, mulling things over, and King Aerys considers such a match inappropriate. And why? He asked. They are brother and sister. Logically the king should have married them a long time ago, or at least betrothed them years ago. There had been talk of such a match, though not with young Inys, but with Prince Viserys the second-born, Shara said, when he was 16 and Princess Avalia 11, but it was all put on hold for her fragile health, and even when she returned to court the king would not resume talk of such a match, what with her being too fragile of health and not enough Targaryen for any of his heirs. Not Targaryen enough, the maester blinked. She is clearly Targaryen enough, she has the silvery blonde hair and the purple eyes. He meant in demeanor, Shara explained. It must not have escaped your notice that Princess Avalia is a bit less temperamental than a normal Targaryen. She is sweet of disposition, too sweet in King Aerys' words. She is kind and she is clever, but she lacks the Targaryen fire, she added, that coupled with her health and the possible difficulty for her to fall pregnant. She's barren. No, she said, not that we know of. Her courses come steadily and regularly, she added. The first man she's ever lain with is her husband. He nodded. That's good, then. She's not barren, so why would King Aerys believe her unable to give any of his sons heirs? I think, she started fidgeting with her hands. Queen R'hllor had some trouble, especially with the princess and Prince Inys. The king believes her to be too sweet of disposition, and he believes that not even the Targaryen seed would be strong enough if the woman is not strong enough. And he does not believe Princess Avalia to be strong enough, the maester completed for her. Shara looked down and nodded. That's the gist of it. Yes, she confirmed. He believes her a weakling that should not have survived her first night in the world. He doesn't understand how she survived until now with all the health problems she had and how small she grew up. The maester leaned back against the back of his chair and pinched the bridge of his nose. I do believe that King Aerys must be misled. He must have been lied to, probably by the healers that cared for Princess Avalia. He said, I will find a way to visit the princess, and when I am sure she has the bearing capacity and is strong enough, we should immediately send word to her father the king. In the meantime it is of foremost importance that she does not fall pregnant with the savage babe. And how can we assure ourselves of that? Shara asked, her mind already reeling. The two seems to be attached to the hip, especially in these last few weeks, she added, letting the distaste fill her voice. There is a contraception that can be used in such circumstances, he said. You are the one who serves her morning meal, are you not? Shara nodded, and he continued, the princess takes tea with it every morning. Yes, she does. I will give you the herbs and the recipes to make such a tea, but we must move carefully. He gestured with a hand around himself. They hear everything. This tea I will give you will help her. He left the sentence to die, but Shara got the meaning of it. She nodded. She must take it every day, he cautioned, or its effect won't be as sure as if it was. Notes. Here we are. As always, let me know what you think of it. Will they have success or not? Will the moon tea work? How will everyone react when they find out? Will they find out? Let me know what you think. As always, sending all my love, G. Chapter 10, Elia 2. Notes. Hello. How are you all? It's been a while, but I'll be updating more regularly, every 2 Fridays, so you'll see a bit more of me in the coming weeks. Hope everything is fine with you all, and without further ado I leave you with the chapter. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Elia 2. She looked at the maester, her dark eyes blinking, alight with hope and surprise. She pressed a hand to her still flat stomach, her eyes filling with tears. Are you sure? She asked, not quite believing her ears. It had been a few weeks that she had felt off, strange and puffed out and a bit bloated. She had told Ashura of her suspicions, but she hadn't wanted to delude herself when it was barely 5 moons that she and her husband had started to share a bed again in hope for another child after the last miscarriage. Quite sure, Your Highness, the man replied cordially. The movements you felt are of the quickening of the babe. You most surely are with child, your highness. Congratulations, he added. May it be the son we are all waiting for so patiently, he told her for good measure. Her smile almost diminished, but the joy of the possibility of being a mother again was so bright she could almost feel the babe in her belly already. Though she was terrified of losing this child too. May it be so, Maester, she nodded. You shall rest as much as possible and sleep with your windows open in the night to help the coming air purify the room and thus help the babe grow, but all the other windows must be blocked from light as it could endanger your sight and that of the babe, he added. Your diet shall be. Elia listened with rapt attention, already deciding to go immediately to the temple to burn a candle for the gods and pray to the maiden, the mother and the crone, that her babe survived pregnancy and birth even if she could not. When the Maester finally let her go, with the warning to rest as much as possible since she had already failed them too many times, Elia forced down the lump in her throat and pushed back the tears that had filled her eyes. No time for sad or angry crying, she told herself, it's a time only for happy tears. This babe shall know only happiness and love. Nothing else. Just love and happiness. She cradled her belly with her hands. You will be my joy and love, just like your sister. She promised her babe, still too little but already strong enough to have quickened in her womb. Lady Ashura was waiting outside, and when she saw her cradling her womb she understood without Elia having to explain. She embraced her fiercely and Elia let out a fit of giggles she couldn't contain. She took her friend's hand in hers. We shall go to the temple presently, she said. I must pray. We'll pray together, Ashura promised her, gripping her hand with hers. Elia was glad they were back on Dragonstone after much pleading on her part, instead of King's Landing. Here Elia could freely be herself without having to be afraid of her good family pitiful glances. She was aware they believed her not to be enough for Roger. Not strong enough to birth him an heir, not strong enough to be one day Queen of the Seven Kingdoms. But Elia would show them. If she had to die to bring this child to the world, she would. She would be strong enough to sacrifice herself for her child, no matter what. They burned a candle in the temple for the maiden, one for the mother and one for the crone. Then, for good measure, they burned one for the stranger, begging him that if it came down to it, he took Elia's life and not that of the child. She caressed her womb, still flat, the little bump already tender but not too noticeable, and she looked at herself in the mirror. The time for supper had come and gone. Her husband had not joined her for the meal because he was lost in his parchments in his solar, but she knew he would come to her bed that night. He was single-mindedly convinced that she would born him the prince that was promised, whoever he might be, and that she'd give him an heir, and Elia this time felt pretty sure she would do so, even if it costed her life to do so. She took her time to brush her long, wavy dark hair, a small bottle of scented oil at her side as she carefully unwinded the knots caused by the wind in her hair. The trek up to the temple had left her almost breathless, so she had taken the rest of the day to rest as she had been bid by the Maester. Her mind went to her good sister in that moment. When they had parted ways, Elia had just lost another child, too early for the babe to have quickened in her womb, the only proof it had ever existed, the bloody sheets after 3 months of her courses being missing. Vielle had embraced her fiercely, her arms sneaking at the small of her back, and though tinier in frame than Elia, she had felt like her good sister had been as big as a mountain, as strong and tall. Of all the Targaryens, Vielle and Inys were the one Elia preferred, barred for her husband. Viserys was too similar to his father for her to feel comfortable with him. He was 4 years younger than Roger, which made him 1 year younger than her, and he had always looked on her with distaste, same as he did to Rhaenys. She could forgive his distaste for his frail good sister, she could not forgive or forget his distaste for her daughter and his niece. Baelor was too fixed on war and battle. Though he was always cordial enough, he never cared too much, neither for her, neither for Rhaenys. He was always with the soldiers training or praying. Vielle she had met after her marriage. The young girl was secluded on Dragonstone for her health, as the sulfur thermal posts of Dragonstone, situated beneath the flaming mountain, were told to help people breathe better. She had been young, maybe 2 or 1 and 10. A slender, if tiny, young girl with a mop of silver hair on her head and bright purple eyes. She was always invariably kind, and she had taken to Elia as a true sister, the same way as if they shared blood instead of not. Inys was kind too, perhaps too kind. He was half in love with his sister by the time he was 10. He believed that his recently returned sister hung the moon in the sky and had taken to follow her like a pup around King's Landing, not caring overly much for Elia and the child she had just borne the dynasty. She had received a missive from her good sister just a couple of weeks prior in which Vial told her she had married the Stark boy and was quite fond of him already. She had alluded to stories and myths as well in her letter, but overall she had sounded happy, and despite feeling upset over her being a realm away from her, Elia was nonetheless happy for the girl. She would have been happier had she married Inez, who loved her deeply, but alas, sometimes her good father was too stubborn to convince otherwise than what he wanted, and he wanted Vial to go north and marry the wolf's son. Elia was happy her good sister had found what degree of happiness she could from her situation. Her husband had been a bit bored but seemed overall content when Elia had read to him his sister's letter, which she couldn't understand. When she had first married him, Roriga doted on his little sister continuously, but since she had been grown enough to return to King's Landing he had grown distant, a bit uncaring from her. And yet, Vial was such a easy person to love, she couldn't understand her good family distancing from her. True, she was very tender and caring, not at all full of rage and selfishness like Viserys. She wasn't as strong and decisive as Roriga and Baelor, but that didn't make her less of a Targaryen. She had been the only one brave enough to face the entire court and her father when Elia had presented Rhaenys to them to defend her and the child. "The child smells Dornish," her good father had commented, and a small round of laughter had filled the great hall of the Iron Throne. Elia had felt her tears fill her eyes, and though Roriga had gone rigid, he had not talked. Yet Avilia, just returned to court after years of seclusion in Dragonstone, had stepped up and took the child from Elia's slack arms. She had buried her nose in her niece's short, dark hair and inhaled deeply, then she had cooed to the babe and looked at the court. "The babe smells fine," she had assured them all with a sweet smile. "She smells like any newborn does, not at all different from how Inez did when he was a babe." Elia had loved her then, and her kind strength made of kind words, calm and sweet glances, and a strong, gentle and radiant heart. Avilia was the best of them all, Elia believed, the best out of all the Targaryen children, and they had sent her away as if no one of importance. She was glad she had found what love she could in her marriage, and that Selhino had went with her, pleading his sword to her safety. "You are still up," she watched as her husband entered the room, his silver hair disheveled from where he had carded his hands through it. "I am sorry I am in so late," he added, "but John had urgent need to talk to me." "I am sure he did," she thought. "Oh, anything of importance I can help with?" "Not at all," her husband replied to her, unlacing his boots and shaking them away. "Nothing you can help with anyway," he added. "I heard you went to the temple today." "Yes," she said. "I wanted to pray," she told him, biting her tongue to not remind him that she was a princess, trained to take care of a princely household, and thus she could very much help him. He nodded, remaining in silence as he shed his clothes without even looking at her. Elia took a deep breath. "After all," she said, "this babe shall be our prince, God's willing," she added. Roriga spun around so quickly she was almost afraid he would break his neck, his purple eyes open in surprise. He wet his lips. "You are?" "I am with child," she confirmed, not able to keep her smile at bay anymore. "Almost 5 moons and half now," she said. "I have been feeling off for weeks. It looks like the babe quickened fine," she told him. "For the way I am in now, the Maester sees no reason why, with the due rest and diet, I can't carry this child to full term," she added. "By his most esteemed opinion, it looks like this pregnancy might be safer than the others that came before." He stood up quickly, coming to her and pressing a fervent kiss to her lips. Elia let him. It was much time he hadn't kissed her like that. She kissed him back and fisted a hand to the fabric of his black tunic at his shoulder. When they came up to breath, he knelt at her side and cradled her belly in his big, warm and slender-fingered hands. "I knew we could do it," he exclaimed, caressing the babe laying under her breast, tucked safely inside of her belly. "He will be our prince, the prince that was promised," he told her, his eyes shining almost similar to the way her good father's did when he would say something he considered terribly funny but was in truth only creepy or terrifying. It scared her so. "May we not worry about prophecies in such a happy moment, my love?" she asked, trying to not let the concern for her husband squash her happiness at being with child again. "You don't understand, dear," he told her. "You can't. You are a woman, but this child, he has a great destiny ahead of him," he assured her, making her feel only more concerned. "He will battle death and win against it," he told her. "He will be a hero." Hero's life always ended in tragedy, she thought. She rather her son be someone normal, leading a full, happy life, than a hero heralded by ancient and obscure prophecies only her husband and John Connington seemed to believe in anymore. She wanted her child to be happy. "I just want him to be happy." Her plead went unanswered. Notes. So here we are. Elia is pregnant and we see more of the Targaryens we don't yet know. What do you think of them? Next up we have a chapter by Vial and one by Ned. I have decided to have a schedule of updates, otherwise I'll never finish my other stories as well. So I write it down below so you know when an update for this fic will be posted, or any other of mine you are following if you are winking smiley. If I manage to stick to it I should be able to finish all the fics and I'll be mighty proud of myself. From next week forward. Even Days, the Emperor's Lily, a John/Dany fic, during the Second Crusade. Uneven Days, Soul Bonded, the John/Sansa Soulmates fic. Every 2 Mondays, Song of the Dragons, an Egon/Theme John, Egon/Theme John/Daenerys and Daenerys/Oberyn fanfic who has become longer than I expected. Every 2 Fridays, Wind of Ice, an Or with Pact of Ice and Fire fulfilled with Brandon Stark marrying an Or Targaryen princess daughter of Aerys II and Rulla with bonus Targaryen princes, the one you are reading now. Twice a month, The Steel Queen, the prequel to Song of the Dragons in which we tell the story of Rhaegar, Elia and Lyanna explaining how some things in the Song of the Dragons came to be. So, as always let me know what you think of it. Sending all my love G. Chapter 11, Ned 2 and Vial 4. Summary. Ned still in the Vale talks with Robert. Vial and Brandon have a bit of alone time. Notes. Hi, how are you? Hope you are all fine. This chapter is meant to speed things around a bit. Now we have laid out the background of the story and we can begin with the big plot. Are you ready for it? See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Ned 2. Lady Catelyn's penmanship was curved, elegant and clean. The opposite of his own, his was distorted, too sharp and almost unreadable, yet the young lady who was supposed to become his wife, her lord father had given his blessing to the match proposed by his father and his own proposal, didn't tell him as much, merely replying cordially and clearly in a way that showed she understood without any problems what he had written. She had been the one to reach out to him at the Vale, thanking him for his most noble proposal and telling him her father had showed himself favorable to the match and that Ned would hear from him soon enough, which he had, and that she had merely wanted to send her greetings and hope she would not disappoint him as wife. Ned had almost felt sorry for the girl, who like him was supposed to marry a complete stranger, but had much more expectations thrown upon her than he did. So he had written back to her, assuring her she could not disappoint him, not even if she tried it. They were hollow words since they didn't even know each other, but Ned hoped the courtesy would please her. What are you doing, still writing poetry to your girl? Ned almost would have jumped out of his skin if Robert wasn't so damn loud all the time. True, he was always moving an impressive weight around, yet his friend, mighty that he was, still was as loud as a mountain moving its first steps. The very ground seemed to shook when he walked in the room. I am not writing poetry, he defended, though a sort of blush was slowly reddening his cheeks. Yes, you are, don't lie. Robert thundered, smiling brightly. Your lady has already won you over. No, she hasn't, he snapped. I barely even know the girl and I have yet to meet her in person still. Robert managed to puff out a truly impressive sigh as he dragged a chair from the table to the front of the hearth, where Ned was currently seated, sitting on it astride, with his arms wrapped around the back of it and his chin resting on his forearms. You know, that even if it was, there is nothing wrong with wanting to be with her, he asked him. There is nothing wrong if you like the woman you're going to spend the rest of your life with. Ned blinked, unsure if his friend was serious or not. Robert had already gotten a young lass pregnant. The girl was supposed to give birth any time now, and his friend had never looked to be the type to settle down for anyone. I know, he replied, carefully watching his friend, observing the flames. Something on your mind, Robert, he wondered, seeing how lost in his thoughts his usually overabundant friend was. I am not the type to settle down, he said, but, you know, with the babe coming any moment, I was thinking. Whatever it was, Robert was overly nervous over it, and Ned could not really fathom what could make his boisterous friend so nervous. Robert, just spit it out already, man, you are starting to worry me, he said, observing his friend as he watched the flames dancing. You have a sister, do you not? Ned blinked, surprised by this turn of events. You know I do, he said tentatively, but what has that to do with anything? Well, your father wants southern matches for both you and her, if I have understood correctly, his friend continued, and Ned started to feel his stomach plummeting, understanding, perhaps, where his friend was going with this. That he'd like, he said, though I doubt Lia is one to get married yet. He added, she's wild and stubborn. I don't think she's ready yet to be married. But with me on the way to be married and Brandon already married to the Targaryen princess, I think we've bought Lia at least some odd years to keep living her dreams of childhood before adulthood comes crashing down on her. Robert hummed. Well, he said, I mean, I could wait, he said, but wouldn't it be amazing if you father considered giving her hand to me? He wondered out, his blue eyes sparkling as he turned to face him. I could accept her wild nature, you know I could, and we'd be brothers in truth and not just in our hearts. I mean, it'd be great, but Robert, you don't even know Lyanna, Ned cautioned. She's not easy, and I'd hate for both of you to be trapped in a marriage that'll do both of you no good if you turn out to despise each other. Well, he said, you talk of her all the time, he justified. I half feel like I know her already, he added, and, besides, isn't it better to consider a match you'd approve of, for your little sister, than some stranger who could mistreat? Some stranger could also grow to love her, Ned thought, but didn't say it, not wanting to squash his friend's attempt of, whatever this was. He patted Robert on the back. Why don't you focus on the babe for now, he suggested, then maybe in a couple of years we could talk about it again, when the time is ripe for a match for Lyanna. Yeah, you're right, Robert nodded. It was just a thought. Vial 4. She sneezed in her handkerchief and sighed. No matter how careful she had been, she had fallen ill with a cold, not a terrible one, like the ones she used to get before secluding herself on Dragonstone, but a cold nonetheless. It was mostly annoying as she still could breathe properly, red nose not taken in account, and she hadn't felt the fever kicking in yet, so with any hope she would easily go through it. For good measure, Vial had gone to the maester who had given her a tonic, explaining of how usually the people of North were used to such colds and that it was perfectly normal for her to attune herself to the weather, and that 1 or 2 colds were to be expected even during springtime or summer. Brandon too had laughed when she first had sneezed, saying he had found her sneeze adorable because so very ladylike. She had pouted and got offended a bit. But he had a great way of distracting her from her touchiness and had kissed her thoroughly, not matter that he could come down with the very same cold. Despite the tonic, though, her cold was not getting better, remaining mostly stable. Which was sending Lady Shara in a frenzy, convinced as she was that they should have never come north. Selhino by his part was mostly amused by her annoyance of the cold, laughing because he too found her sneeze to be very ladylike, like her husband did. A pair of menace they were. How do you feel, my bunner man? Stuffed, she replied dryly. I'd like nothing better than that tea Winterberry's mother makes with the leaves and flowers of the forest, she muttered. Instead I am cooped up inside of here, she said, gesturing to their chamber. Brandon smiled softly, fondly at her. What do you say if I bring you somewhere else, he asked. Vial snorted, a most unladylike sound. So Suha, you have heard Maester Wallers, she said, with my history with difficulty of breath I must stay inside until the cold is done with. Well, Brandon amended, we wouldn't be getting out. Not really. His eyebrows rose expectantly. Vial observed him suspiciously. What do you mean? Brandon took her hand in his and kissed the palm of it and the inside of her wrist. He was overly affectionate and passionate. Vial didn't know if she'd ever grow tired of him and truly hoped he would not grow tired of her. You once asked me if I'd humor you for something senseless, he told her, his lips still against the skin of her wrist, making her shiver. Vial nodded and Brandon sneaked an arm slowly around her waist, playing with the curly ends of her braid, bringing her simultaneously closer. Would you humor me for something a bit senseless, he wondered then as he leaned in to press a kiss to her lips. Vial let herself be kissed. When he finally leaned a bit back to let her breath through her mouth, she breathed out always. He gave her a bright smirk, then took her hand in his, fished her cloak from where it was folded on the back of a chair and led her outside their chambers. She followed him down a long corridor, down 2 flights of stairs and behind a closed stone door she had never seen before. The space inside the room was very narrow and a long staircase led below. Brandon led her down holding a torch over his head to brighten the road for them to go down. The air inside the room was thick and vaporous, moist and humid. Warm. Where are you taking me? Patience, my bunner man, he told her with a smile. You must have patience. She rolled her eyes, a response already on her tongue when they came before a wooden door. Brandon opened this too, then made to latch the torch to a hook on the wall almost too hot to touch, and Vial pressed a hand to it, reveling on its warmth. How do you do that? Brandon asked as he turned and observed her hand on the wall. Vial noticed then that he was overly cautious as to not touch the stone. Do what? She asked, flexing her fingers on the flat, warm surface. That, he exclaimed, catching her wrist and turning her palm up to inspect it. There was panic in his voice, but watching her palm, as clean, soft and tender as always, he brought his gaze up in her purple eyes. "That what?" she asked. "You know I always press my face to the walls in our chamber," she said. "True, these are a little hotter, but not too much." "Not too much," he repeated with a disbelieving sound. "These are hot enough to cook eggs on them." "They are piping hot," he exclaimed. "Once Lionel touched the wall by mistake. She had to wear a cloth bandaged on her hand with a mint ointment for 2 weeks before the skin got better." Vial frowned, moving her hand in his grasp. "Well, perhaps they were hotter than they are now, because I don't feel them too hot." "Love," he muttered, "they are hot enough that I can feel their heat without having to touch them," he said, caressing her palm. "Well," she offered, "fire cannot kill a dragon," the words of her house falling easily from her mouth, after having heard them all her life. True, her brothers much rather the saying, "You don't want to wake the dragon, do you?" But fire cannot kill a dragon was as much renown as fire and blood. "Can you burn?" he wondered then. "I never really tried," she deadpanned. "Would you like to test this theory of yours?" she asked, reaching out for the torch. Brandon made to stop her, but her hand was already engulfed by the flame of it, licking at her skin and dancing in between her fingers, but not burning her. Vial observed the flame with rapt attention, surprised she had never noticed her resistance to fire before. Though, she thought dimly, if she had, perhaps her father would have her married to Baylor, or, God's forbid, Viserys, and she'd never met Brandon. Brandon, who, by the look of it, had had enough of her recklessness, jumped in, his hand wrapping around her wrist, groaning as the flame glazed over his skin as he dragged her hand back, inspecting it with surprised eyes. When he brought his grey-brown mottled eyes on her purple ones, there was surprise, desire and worry in his glance. "Well," she offered, "this proves it. I don't easily burn," she offered, looking over his burned and inflamed skin. "Perhaps," she said, looking it over, "we should have this watched by the maester and—" Vial never finished her sentence because Brandon raised her from underneath her backside and brought her flush against him, kissing her fervently and carding a hand in her braid, making it come undone under his ministrations as Vial wrapped her arms around his shoulders and cradled the back of his head with a hand. Brandon kept kissing her. Even when he left her mouth free to breath, he latched himself at her neck and collarbone. Vial could feel his hardness against her body, and she gasped when Brandon pushed more firmly against her, almost biting down the porcelain skin of her collarbone. "Never," he pleaded, "do something so reckless again," he mouthed against her skin, passing his tongue where he had just bitten her. "Just like a wolf would." Vial chuckled breathlessly. "Now you know how I feel when you and Selhino use real steel weapons to duel together," she said, and he nipped at her skin, pinching her on the back of her thigh for good measure. "Never again," he demanded of her. Vial made to kiss him on the lips, but he leaned back just enough to escape her mouth. She rolled her eyes. "Not even if it might save my life." "You'll never be in life or death peril. I'll always protect you, I promise." Vial giggled. "Fine." Then she said, "I won't do anything reckless, unless there is necessity of it. How does that sound?" He never replied because he kissed her again. Then he set her to her feet and, still an arm wound around her waist, lead her behind the wooden door, leading her in what looked to be an underground cave with the air so moist you could almost touch it with your fingers. An underground cave with a big pool of dark, warm water and a smaller one with clear cyan water a little to the side. "These are the pools beneath Winterfell," he told her, still pressed against her, her back against his chest, his manhood clearly still hard and pressing against her. "That one and several others," he told her, "are the warm ones that heat up the keep." He told her that one comes from the mountains, instead, and is ice cold. He rested his chin over her head. "I though, since you found respite in the thermae of Dragonstone, that these could help too." And this time it was Vial cutting him off. She spun around in his hold, went on her tiptoes and kissed him squarely on the mouth. Then she took a step back and smiled when he groaned at the sudden loss of contact, but she merely started unlacing her gown. "We should head in," she said. "What do you think, New Harzokla Valrys?" "I still don't know what that means," he said, almost as breathless as she let her gown fall and pooling at her feet. "Why don't you come with me to find out?" she suggested, taking some steps back before turning and dipping inside the warm water pool. Needless to say, he followed her at the speed of light. Vial had been at the thermae every day for her childhood years, and yet she had never guessed that one day she'd make love with her husband in the pools of thermae under his very home. Their home, now. Yet, that was how it went and she couldn't be happier, and she sent a silent prayer to the gods that had made so that she and Brandon could meet and get married, instead of trapping her in a marriage to one of her brothers she loved as such, but that could never make her this happy. As they were still intertwined together, her chest pressed against his, she astride of him and Brandon leaning against the edge of the pool, Vielle smiled contently and pressed a cheek against his shoulder, her lips barely a whisper away from the skin of his neck. "It means my wolf husband," she told him then as they simply stayed in each other's embrace. He was dragging his fingers up and down her spine and chuckled, the vibration reaching to their still joined bodies. "A dragon and a wolf," he muttered. "Who'd have believed it?" She giggled. "I did," she said seriously, watching him with her amethyst eyes. He smiled lazily at her and pressed a sweet kiss to her temple. She sighed. "I don't want to bring your hopes up," she said, "but I might be with child," she told him. Brandon blinked and watched her cautiously. "Are you certain?" She shook her head. "Not yet," she said, "but I've never missed a course since I flowered, and now I've missed 3 in a row," she explained. "My breasts are tender and I've gained some weight, enough that the maids need to lace my corsets more laxly," she added. "Have you spoken with the maester?" "Not yet." She shook her head. "Until the babe quickens in the womb he wouldn't be able to say anything for certain," she explained. "Thought I have started to be picky with what I eat." I noticed," he replied, surely thinking of when, a couple of weeks prior, Vielle had been nauseated by the mere smell of the tea she usually drank and stopped eating the vegetables she was so fond of until a month ago or so. "My mother was the same when she was pregnant with Inez," she said, "and she always remembers she had grown a quite sudden fondness of oranges when she was pregnant with me. Like you and the forest's tea you talk about constantly." She said in the same way. "We should go and tell the maester, see what he says," Brandon suggested, his brow furrowed. "As I told you, he wouldn't be able to say anything for sure, at least until the child has quickened in the womb, and, you know, I don't particularly like him. He is creepy and I don't know, he does not seem trustworthy." Brandon shook his head, but to her serious expression and the pleas in her purple eyes he softened. He carded a hand in her damp silver hair and nodded, kissing her on the nose. "Fine, we can wait a bit more," he said, "though we might want to see the children. They have their ways to learn when a woman is with child. I think Mahonia told my mother she was pregnant all 4 times she was with child." She gave him a bright smile and kissed him on the lips. Brandon nodded. Then a bright smile found its place on his lips. "So, a child?" "It's more than probable," she nodded, "though I'd like to think you knew what might very well happen every time we laid together, and it looked like it was the national day of cutting off your spouse with a kiss," because Brandon kissed her again fervently. "A child," he exclaimed, and she giggled. "A child? Think you can accept competition in that department?" she wondered, teasing him easily. He kissed her again more than gladly. He exclaimed, pure joy filling his tone. "I knew you would give me children." "Oh," she teased, "you knew, did you now?" "The night of your welcoming feast," he said, seriously, "I could almost see it before my very eyes, you rocking a child born of our union. It had never happened before. It made me feel content. I thought nothing of it, at the time. I am not a greensboro like Benjamin or my mother. I thought it just wishful thinking. But you proved me wrong, and it is such a sweet defeat that I cannot help but be happy for it." Vielle found it so sweet that she couldn't even get mad at the mention of the women he might have taken to bed before her. She kissed him again. And life was good. Notes. So here we are. Would you look at that? Vielle is immune to fire. Looks like Aes and Rolla did make dragons in their children, only it's the one that believe less Targaryen than all the others. Fear not, I am not stealing Daenerys' plot points. When she comes to be only, she won't be the only dragon, but I'm not telling you how or when. That'd be spoilery. Winking and tongue-poking smiley. What did you think of Ned and Robert talking? And of Vielle and Brandon? They are very sweet. To clarify, Shara has not yet given her moon tear because this happens around the same time she and the maester talk over their plan, a couple of days after. Hope you liked it. Next chapter should be up on the 16th of April. Let me know what you think of it. As always, sending all my love, G. Chapter 12, Lyanna 2. Summary. Lyanna in Winterfell. Notes. Hello. How are you? Hope you are fine. I must warn you, this chapter was a bit draining to write because it is by Lyanna's POV and many things happen that shake her emotionally, and it does end on a discordant note, which is exactly what I wanted. I am trying to write Lionel in a believable way. She is a teenager, so her emotions are all over the place more often than not, and I established she does feel a bit rejected by the North. Though she is much loved by her family, they do have some strong reactions in this chapter, and we see Vial being a calm, stormy and burning fire. I am afraid that, just as it happens to real teenagers, what will be said to Lionel is going to get stuck with her for the rest of the fic. So, sorry if this brings discomfort to anyone. Hope you enjoy the chapter anyway. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Lionel 2. The news was given during their breaking of their fast. Prince Roriger and Princess Elia were expecting a child. Her good sister had called them all, her face shining with happiness as she had shared the news about her brother, and Cecilhino, who had taken to break his fast with them, had almost choked on his last bite of dried fish. One of his favorite dishes, she had noticed. Her lady mother had stood up then. What a wonderful news, she had said, we will pray for the health of mother and baby both. Her good sister had nodded, a small joyful smile on her lips. Thank you, Lady Stark. Somehow she managed to still stay formal and yet felt familiar all the same. Lionel really didn't know how she did it. And they hope to meet us at the great tourney of Harrenhal, hosted by Lord Went in 6 moons. They hope to show us their child when this time's come, as it should be born a good 3 months before the tourney, she added with a glorious grin that made her look almost like a child. Then her good sister had turned to Brandon and he had smiled up at her, turning then to them. Even seated, Brandon was almost as tall as his wife, who was really tiny if compared to his height. Brandon kissed the palm of her hand, and since when had her brother become so mushy, she wondered, and smiled broadly to them. We do have some news too, he said. Vial is with child, he added, looking at his wife with a glance filled with love and fondness as she blushed like a maiden from a song. Their family erupted in smiles and joyous exclamations, but Lionel noticed Lady Shara pale visibly and look at her trembling hands. She was seated not too far behind and she looked shell-shocked and almost sad about it. Her mother jumped up and embraced Vial with such a fondness in her smile that Lionel found it almost contagious as Brandon stood up to receive their father's hug and well wishes. How far along? Her mother asked, and Vial rolled her eyes. As if you don't know, she teased with a smile. I think around 4 moons, Mahonia has confirmed it for me the other day, she added. She and Leaf think the birth will occur a bit earlier than it should, but that we will be both fine. Lionel stood up too then, as Benjen embraced Vial and congratulated her before whispering something in her ear that made her smile broadly. Lionel walked to her brother and awaited for her turn as her lady mother hugged close to her, her firstborn. Then Brandon turned to her and Lionel jumped at his neck, holding him close. I am happy for you, she told him, and Brandon hoisted her up from the waist, her feet dangling aloof from the floor, and when he finally set her down, Vial was beside him too, Cecilhino looking almost terrified behind them, but happy nonetheless. Congratulations, Your Highness, she offered with a small bow, but her good sister shook her head and grasped her hand in hers. There is no need for such a formality, Lionel, we are family, she reminded her, and, she looked at Brandon then, we would like very much if you would consider being the child's faith mother, she said. Lionel blinked unsure. It is an old Valyrian tradition, Brandon told her, a tradition the Targaryen have left behind officially to take the faith of the 7 when they conquered the 7 kingdoms, he explained, but they keep it in private. A faith mother or father is someone who swears to be there for the babe if something were to happen to the parents. They have the right to adopt them if anything befalls the parents and are duty-bound to see to their needs if the parents can't. And Vial, his wife, smiled up at him sweetly, we both think we'd like for you to be the babe's faith mother. Lionel felt the tears prickling at her eyes and she nodded, touched beyond belief. Oh, Lionel, Vial cooed softly before stepping away from Brandon's hold and taking her softly by a wrist and embracing her gently. She was tiny, a couple of inches taller than her, and Lionel hid her face in the crook of her neck as she lightly carded her hand in her dark hair. Lionel must have misjudged her good sister. Maybe she was not the Targaryen to fear, or maybe Benjen had mistaken a dream for a vision. I am sorry, she said as she softly cried against her. For what? Vial asked as Lionel stepped back from her hold, her eyes still shining. I have been distant and discourteous with you. Please forgive me, she caught her mother's proud gaze, but Vial's purple eyes filled with fondness. No need for apologies, Lionel. We are a family, she told her with a bright smile, so, will you accept? Lionel smiled. It would be my honor, she told them, and she had honestly never seen her brother in such a way. though the words spoken by Benjamin kept replaying in her mind as if they had a life of their own. She just had to look after everything and make sure his prophecy did not come true. She couldn't bear to see her brother's smile dim. Not for how bright it was now. They met in secret as they usually did. Cecilino arrived after she had been waiting for him for quite some time, Hodder by her side as their lookout. He was not to speak unless someone was coming. Lionel still remember when he could talk properly. Hodder. Hodder. She couldn't say how that had happened, but that good boy had turned in something painful to just see, and yet Lionel was loyal. She would not leave him behind just because he was now different. Finally, she exclaimed, jumping off the bench she was sat on, I was starting to think you had bailed on me. Cecilino violet eyes flashed as if he said, I gave you my word. I never betray my word. Good to know, she said, bending down and retrieving the 2 wooden swords she had loaned from the armory. No one would notice their disappearance right now, and threw one at him. He caught it with the ease of someone used to combat. He wielded and swung it around, rotating his shoulders for a while. All right, he said, do you remember how to take your stance? He asked her, then coming closer to her. Her father had only accepted for her to have some archery practice, but Lionel had convinced Cecilino to, at the very least, teach her some basic sword moves. It had been particularly easy to convince him when Lionel had told him how much she desired for it, to be able to protect herself and those she loved. She nodded and took her stance, her feet apart just so, her torso leaning forward just a bit. He nudged the back of her knees, bend a bit your knees or you won't be flexible enough, and so their third lesson begun. He taught her how to elbow an opponent in the chin, or the nose if he was short enough, while spinning around herself to, then, point her blade to her opponent's pulse point. They tried it a couple of times before they tried a small duel. Lionel could feel every single muscle in her body, every single nerve moving to make the stances and attacks. He was pulling his punches, so to speak, yet Lionel was quite proud of herself. Which was how she found herself with a bruised chin and his wooden sword pointed at the neck. She was about to start laughing when a growl made them both jump. They turned around and Lionel paled when she saw Charlotte slowly stepping towards them, his fangs bared and his dark fur almost as if electrified. Cecilino pushed her behind him and Charlotte narrowed his eyes, his terrible scar moving with his whole snout as he stalked closer. Cecilino brought up his wooden sword, intent on defending her if necessary, only with that, no matter that the direwolf was twice his size and that his fangs were almost twice as sharp as a normal blade, he could literally snap the wooden sword like a twig if he so wished. Do you know how to calm him? Cecilino asked, seemingly calm. Lionel shook her head. He listens only to Brandon and sometimes not even to him, she told him. We do not control the direwolves, they are masters of their own choices, she almost screamed when Charlotte made to attack. Cecilino swiftly jumped to the side and avoided his fangs just barely. He then swung his wooden sword and hit him in the back of the neck, but the wolf only turned more feral, convinced as he was that Cecilino was a threat, possibly to her, after having seen their small combat. Run, Lionel, run, Cecilino told her. Go call for help, he said as he jumped out of the way of another attack. It almost seemed as if Charlotte was playing with his prey. I am not leaving you. Go. Call for help. And Lionel made a step closer to him, but Charlotte growled more deeply, so she looked in his violet eyes and decision set in her bones. She turned around and ran, screaming at the tops of her lungs. Hodder was sat behind the wall where they had left him to be their lookout, his hands pressed to his ears, his eyes shut as he rocked himself back and forth, crying out softly and terrified. Hodder, Hodder, Hodder. She crashed into Brandon the moment she turned a corner near the glass gardens. Vile was with him too, mindful not to run or exert herself too much. She was weaving a crown of pale white flowers and red berries, her amethyst eyes were alight with fear. Lionel. Why are you screaming that way? What are you? Brandon's eyes fell on the wooden sword in her hand and the red spot on her chin. There's no time, she hastened, we have to make haste. Charlotte is trying to kill Cecilino. She had never seen her good sister so pale. Brandon didn't wait and broke in a run. Stay with Vile, he ordered her, running in the direction she had come from. Do not follow me. But obviously neither of them listened because they followed him at a more sedated pace. Though when a male scream cleaved through the air they hastened their steps, Lionel felt her sweat grow cold on her skin, her matted hair on her neck feeling almost like choking her as they turned just in time to see Brandon restraining Charlotte by the neck as the immense black direwolf stood on all fours above Cecilino, laid out on the ground, faint of look, the wooden sword broken still in his hand, a bloody gash on his lower abdomen. Vielle sobbed at her side as Lionel felt the grip of her own wooden sword slip as the stick fell to the ground. She looked at her good sister, tears shining down her cheeks, a hand to her mouth, trembling. "Call the maester," she pleaded with broken voice. Lionel didn't reply, so she turned to her, raising her voice. "Lionel, go call the maester," and Lionel was running once again. She met Benjen, her lady mother and the maester halfway through as her brother seemed to have seen what was happening thanks to his gift. When they returned, Vielle and Brandon were knelt beside Cecilino. Charlotte was nowhere to be seen, probably bodily restrained by Brandon. He had, then, turned and left thinking the threat to his master and his kin gone. Lionel felt as if she could not move, standing quietly, pale and upset as the maester observed the wound. Cecilino was blissfully unaware of the man probing at his wound as he was unconscious. Vielle was sobbing and Brandon looked clearly worried. Her lady mother and brother knelt at their side too, but Lionel stood back. When Brandon noticed her there he stood up. "Do you see?" he yelled. "So you see, now Lionel," he demanded. Lionel felt the tears prickle at her eyes as she looked in the eyes in storm of her brother, who stood tall and almost menacing before her. "Do you have any idea what could have happened if Charlotte got to you too? Have you grown mad?" he snapped. "I do not recognize you anymore," he said. "Is it so deep, this need, this hunger for blood, so strong that you will find it even in those closest to you? Answer me," he demanded, taking hold of her shoulders and shaking her, not violently. Never she had been afraid of him, and she wasn't in that moment. His eyes were filled with worry. "For the god's sake, Lionel. How do you not understand?" "Brandon," she didn't yell. She didn't scream or cry. She just whispered his name, and her brother, still turning to her, his expression growing softer the moment he met her gaze. "Stop, don't you see how scared she is?" Lionel watched her brother look at her and then return to his wife. "You are upset." "Of course I am upset. My brother is laying in a pool of his own blood because he was foolish enough to humor the demands a child." The definition, though fitting like a glove, made her feel as if she had just taken 5,000 steps behind instead of forward. Especially since her good sister wasn't even watching her. And yet she had just defended her by her brother's fury. "Do not make me more upset still," she added, and her voice this broke in a fractured whisper. Lionel watched her brother kneel beside his wife once again and lulling as the maester called for some men to help him bring Cecilino inside. Only then did Lionel notice her mother and the righteous fury as the woman slapped her. "I taught you better than this, Lionel," her mother seethed. "How could you be so foolish? Your father was right." Lionel looked down, tears pooling in her eyes. "Enough, it was Benjen." "She is sorry," he added. "Neither of them thought this through, but she's hardly the only one responsible. We are only worsening things as we fight one another." He nudged to the men carrying Cecilino away. "He will be fine. I have seen it," he promised. And yet it didn't squish away how guilty she felt. Cecilino would survive. Thankfully Benjen vision had enabled them to get to him in time to save his life, but he laid on the bed, his abdomen covered only by a fur and his wound covered in a yellow paste and bended with clean white clothes already stained yellow and red and black with the small, visible bulges of the stitches done by Maester Wallers. Vielle had yet to leave her brother's bedside. Brandon instead had left when they had known he would survive, though he was asleep thanks to the milk of the poppy the maester had given him, to meet their father at the gates. He had sent a rider as soon as he had been able to warn him of what had happened. Her lady mother was with Vielle sat at the bedside as she tried to coax her good daughter to eat even just small bites of a light dinner she had called for in advance. But Lionel's good sister claimed to have lost all appetite, no matter that there was another life now growing inside of her. Lionel hovered outside the chamber, pale in face, her face tear-stricken, her eyes puffy, red and so dry they hurt. Yet she didn't dare to enter the chamber, especially after Vielle's lashing out. "My brother is lying in a pool of his own blood, because he was foolish enough to humor the demands of a child." Lionel had been called childish before, usually by her lord father, but never had it touched her so deeply, especially after the warming up of her and her good sister's relationship just a couple of days before when she had asked her to be her child's faith mother. Now she truly felt childish, and Vielle's tone, her words, they had been as if a bucket of icy water had been thrown in her face. They had cut right through her. She had endangered him, it was true, but she had no way to know Charlotte would be around that day, and neither that he would take their friendly sparring for Cecil trying to hurt her. She could not have known. And she couldn't know, because no matter how much she tried to prove how worthy she was, and wasn't she was the daughter of Winterfell, a Stark, and the direwolf was her sigil too. The only thing she seemed to manage to do was prove to everyone, to herself even, how much unworthy she was. As if she didn't belong. She would have known Charlotte was coming if she was more like Brandon who had fought and restrained the immense direwolf barehanded. She would have known if she was like Benjen, even just a little bit. Instead, she did not know. She never would know. Because the North was rejecting since she was born, and kept rejecting her over and over. Father has been delayed, Brandon said, suddenly appearing behind her and grazing by her to enter the chamber. It has suddenly started to snow heavily, he added, looking at their lady mother and then over to his wife. Vial was not crying anymore, but she was twisting her hands in her lap, and she kept leaning forward and back on the chair she was sat on, as if she was trying to rock herself as she would a child. Her eyes were filled with sadness and concern. Brandon knelt by her side. Bunnerman he called her, Moondragon, and when she didn't give any indication of having heard, Brandon cupped her face and turned her so that she would look at him. When her purple eyes glanced in his, she started crying again. What will I do if he dies? She sobbed. He is my brother, she added, no matter who his mother is, he is my brother. I know, love, he cooed, but you heard the maester, he will survive, he reasoned with her, his voice gentler, softer than she had ever heard it. Vial sobbed again and again. Lyanna chanced to look at her mother and she found her gazing at her. She nudged with her head for her to come inside, but Lyanna looked at Vial, and still remembering the way her good sister had reacted to her, she shook her head and turned to leave. She was only upset. She blinked and looked up in Benjen's grey eyes. She will come around. Lyanna looked down. What will happen now? Benjen grasped her hand in his and squeezed it. He will be all right, he promised, and he won't be mad at you, I promise. Lyanna nodded and left. She was not ready to face any of them. Not yet. She looked out of the window and saw the snow falling ever so slowly, almost numbly, and somehow it reminded her of the way Vial had been rocking herself when she left. She shook her head and went to her hiding spot, unable to do anything but keep replaying the scene in her mind of him laying in a pool of blood, knocked out and unresponsive. She clenched her fists, her anger growing inside of her as if an hunger in her blood. Notes. Here we are. As always, let me know what you think of it. I know that theoretically Egon was born sometimes after the tourney, but that never sat right with me. Go look even in my other fic in which he is a protagonist. I have made him older than he is by at least a year. I don't know, it feels better this way. I decided to include Hodder because I find Lyanna's loyalty toward him to be endearing and sweet, and a true mark of her character, of the woman she is going to become. Not a perfect one who made and will make mistakes as anyone, but a strong and loyal one. In this we see both her warrior side and her romantic side, because I feel like Lyanna while being Lyanna is like Arya and Sansa smashed together. Just as willful as both her nieces. This story narrates Lyanna's path of acceptance of herself despite what she feels as rejections and faults. We also see Vial's calm rage. I have to admit some of my own character often can be found in the lines of both Vial and Lyanna's faults and merits. For instance, I am very difficult to anger, but when I am truly angry I will be calmly spitting out hurtful things. Thankfully it is very difficult to make me so angry, and I was prone as a teenager to not think things very through and feeling a bit rejected, which thankfully I grew out of most of the time. So both characters' reactions are so felt because I've felt them, in a slight lesser way, on my own skin. I do hope you liked it. As always, sending all my love, G. Chapter 13, Vial v. Summary. A bit flash forward. Vial pregnant in Winterfell. Notes. Hi. How are you? How are you enjoying the fic? Obviously I meant no disrespect to those called Dana if there are people called such, but there are names we like and names we dislike. Medium light skin tone shrug female sign. Emoji this chapter. Next we see Elia. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Vial v. Here you go, she murmured as she helped her brother drink a cup of iced water. He was still abed. Thankfully the fever that had set over him after he had been wounded had been quickly brought down, and the wounds on his chest were now healing. They were still covered in bruises and angry red, the stitches as black as the night on his otherwise marred coal skin. Stop looking so gloomy, Vial, he told her softly, catching her hand and squeezing it. It cannot be good for the babe. I thought you would die, she admitted, her purple eyes shining with unshed tears. And Brandon, gods, Brandon barehanded hold Charlotte off of you, she said. I know you were scared, he said, but stressing over it won't help anyone now, he told her, especially not you and not the babe that you carry. You remember what stress did to Elia with her first pregnancy? Vial nodded. I've asked to start the lying in already, she said, but both Lady Lyra and Brandon said it was out of question. Then with you still not completely healed. What do you mean? He blinked unsure. He looked down to her now clearly visible and quite big already baby bump. Her bosom had grown in size too, almost twice the size it had been initially, and the grey gown she was wearing had an high collar but did nothing to hide her condition, nor that it was needed. Normally by this time in the south the woman already was in the lying-in period, in a chamber darkened with only one window left open to let fresh air in, and she would remove herself from the public eye, certainly Maester Wallace suggested. He did, but northerners are different than us, she said, and I don't fully trust that man, even if he saved your life with the most zealous expression I ever saw him wear, she added. Mahonia, the chief's wife of the children of the forest, has sent Leaf, who is a renowned midwife in the north. She said she has been the one to help me through the pregnancy as she did with Lady Lyra's 4 pregnancies. Your midwife is a child of the forest. Selhino blinked and Vial smiled, nodding. She said, sounding like a proper northerner already. What more, Lady Lyra didn't any lie in, as didn't any of the Stark women before her, she added. They believe fresh air and daily walks and task to be helpful for the mother-to-be, as long as I don't wear myself down and there aren't complications. So you won't do the lying in? Selhino inquired. Nay, she said, I feel best that the last month or so I do it, especially since mother had so many difficulties with both me and Inez. Difficult pregnancies run in my blood, I am afraid, she added, but until I feel good I'll try the northern way. As long as you are sure, Selhino said. Have you and Brandon thought about the names? She looked down. Not really, she said. I wanted to ask also Liona's help on the matter, since she knows northern names better than me, but she has been sketchy, avoiding everyone since the incident. She grimaced. It must have to do with the fact that I was unkind to her as you were unconscious because of the worry and the stress. She has been avoiding both me and Brandon like the plague. Selhino rolled his eyes. Have you apologized? Vial shrugged. Didn't really see the point, she said. I know how it sounds, but I won't apologize because I said what I was thinking. Both of you were reckless and both of you should have known better, she added. Vial, no one could have predicted Charlotte to arrive and feel like I was a threat to Lionel. He reasoned kindly. That damn beast is off in the woods most of the time, he added. We could not have known he would appear in that moment and misinterpret. It's what happens when you keep a man-eating beast as a pet. Charlotte is not a pet, she exclaimed. He is of the north. He goes and comes as he pleases and he is linked with Brandon and Winterfell, but that does not mean that he is a pet. You'd never call a dragon a pet. All right, no need to get incensed, sister, he exclaimed, his hands shooting up in the air in surrender. I am sorry. And she was crying now, and now I am crying. Perfect. My feelings are all over the place these days. Vial, you don't have to apologize because you think we were reckless or should have known better. But knowing you, you must have said it in quite a hurtful way, he added. You have to apologize because of the way you said it, not because of what you said. Vial looked down, feeling like a child. She wasn't much more than a child really, but she would become a mother soon. All right, she conceded. You are right. I will speak to her. Today, he added. She rolled her purple eyes but nodded. Today. She met Brandon on the way to the courtyard. He swept her in an embrace and a kiss just under the entrance of the keep. Your lips are icy cold, Bunnerman, he muttered, leaning back. Vial shivered. It is a bit cold outside, she nodded. Didn't the citadel write that spring was almost here, she asked, hugging herself in her fur-lined cloak. Brandon shook his head. But here springs comes with still some snowfall, he said. As springs blossoms in the south we still get the snow, when in the south it's almost summer we get spring, he explained. Vial nodded. Have you seen your sister, she asked, looking around and searching for her good sister. Brandon's expression turned sour. I did, he said. Tried talking to her too, she never pouted so long, he added. So childish. Vial shook her head. She was scared, she said, and we attacked her. She looked at the grey sky. We should have been, perhaps, more understanding. She is just a girl after all. Brandon looked down at her, amazed. You think? I know, she said. I was pretty hurtful to her, she added, because I was scared and afraid, and she behaves now like a wounded wolf. She keeps her distance. Do you know she went to visit Selhino? Brandon shook his head. I was asleep in a chair apparently, she recounted, and she had the courage to approach him only when the beast guarding him was slumbering. Brandon arched a brow but said nothing to that affirmation. She apologized for having put him at risk, she cried. I think we were too hard on her, she added, and Brandon sighed. I was never good with her, he admitted, not when we discuss. Ned would usually be the peacemaker between us two. Too much of wolf blood between the two of us to make us swallow our pride and just apologize. He smiled sadly. Once Ned closed us in a chamber with the aid of Benjen until we discussed it out instead of pouting at each other. I think I was 4 and 10 and she 7 or 8. Vial giggled. Good thing I have not an ounce of wolf blood then, she teased. I'm going to talk to her now, she said. I hope to apologize for my behavior and ask her about names. I still maintain Donna to be a perfect name. For a horse perhaps, she said. No, I don't feel like Donna would do, she added before she grimaced and caressed her belly. Stop kicking, you menace, she whispered to her babe. Brandon threw his head back and laughed, that full belly laugh that she loved so much. Are you giving trouble to your mother already, Min Vavuk? Brandon asked, pressing a hand to her belly. The babe quieted immediately, like it usually did when Brandon would speak to it or caress her belly. Min Vavuk, he called the babe, little wolf. There's no way around it. When your voice is heard the babe decides to go dancing in my womb, she said with a smile. Either that or the babe gets offended you don't give him or her the attention craved. Brandon gave her a kiss and smiled. The babe recognizes his pack, he said. Brandon was pretty sure it would be a boy, and secretly Vial thought the same. She just had this feeling, but she knew better than to give people hope for something that might not happen. Leaf too was convinced it was a boy, strong and big judging by the fullness of her womb, or so she had said, but Maester Wallace was instead convinced by the way she was carrying that it might be a girl. They had even discussed it. Vial had been afraid Brandon would be disappointed if it turned out to be a girl, but he had been offended she would be concerned of such a thing. Any babe, he had told her, either boy or girl, would be a blessing. I don't know how you Southerners do it in that pit you call capital, but here a girl is equally as wanted as a boy. And if we have only girls, she had asked. I suppose the North will choose its protector after me anyway, he had said. Besides, if we only have girls it just means we'll have to change a few things around here. She could marry a cousin like my mother did to take on the burden she cannot carry alone. But we'll cross that bridge when it comes to it. Besides, he had added, you'll give me boys and girls alike, I've seen it. I am going to talk with her, now, she said, standing on her tiptoes and pressing a kiss to his lips. She then grimaced. You should take a bath, she told him, you stink. I will wait for you for the bath, he added suggestively. Vial swatted him on the chest. She is in by the broken tower, it's her hiding spot, but I've told you nothing. Vial nodded and grasped her skirts in one hand and started to walk to the broken tower. Many of the workers of Winterfell stopped their works to greet her with small bows and easy hand gestures. Vial replied in kind to all of them. She found Lyanna sat between the ruins, brooding, her black hair braided simply and wearing a steel grey tunic and black breeches. Her cheek was stained with dirt but she looked otherwise fine. What are you doing here? She demanded. Go away. Vial observed the ruins, trying to discern a way to Lyanna, sat atop the biggest of them all at the feet of the broken tower. She hiked her skirts up more and slowly started to climb and walk around the ruins. Lyanna, hearing her pant and almost fall, spun around so quickly her braid almost lashed at her face. What are you doing? Are you crazy? She demanded. Go back. You are risking the babe this way. If you won't come out I will come in, she deadpanned. I just need a bit more of time. And she leaned against one of the blocks in ruin when she felt a small hand wrapping around her other arm. She looked up and Lyanna was there. How is that for being childish and reckless? She demanded. Come on, Brandon will surely have my head if something happens to you or the babe. Vial couldn't help but smile as she let her good sister guide her through the ruins and to the immense block upon which she had been seated. Brandon thinks it's a boy, she said. And what do you think? Lyanna asked, looking down at her with her steel grey eyes as Vial sat on the block and she remained on her feet, her arms crossed before herself. I feel it is a boy too, she said, but I don't want to raise any hopes in case it's a girl. You know, right, that we aren't like those tossers in the south. Lady Mage Mormont fights alongside with her lord brother and she has only daughters and no father to claim them, yet they are named Mormont anyway. If the babe will be a girl we'll be equally as happy. Vial nodded. I know. It's just, for how much we all say the North is different, and it is, still Brandon will need a male heir. Lionel shrugged. My mother was her father's heir, she said, and she married and my father took my grandfather's place. Lady Sansa Stark was the only child of Lord Stark and she married her half-uncle and she was still Lady of Winterfell. Vial nodded. They remained silent for a long moment, then Vial sighed. I am sorry, she said. I should have not said those things, she admitted. You were reckless, but you didn't know what would happen and I should not have acted like it was your fault. I am sorry. Lyanna kept looking at the walls of Winterfell for a long moment, then she nodded. What it was that you said, she murmured. We are family, there is no need of apologies between us. Still, Vial said, doesn't mean I am not sorry. Forgive me. Lyanna rolled her eyes. Forgive me, she demanded, her tone teasing. All right, Lyanna muttered in the end, a small smile dancing on her lips. All right, I forgive you. They remained silent, sharing a companionable silence, looking at the sun peeking from the grey clouds. So, Vial said about the names, Brandon wants to name her Dana if it happens to be a girl. Dana. Lyanna chuckled. Gods, it would be awful, she commented. I know. And if it's a boy, she asked. Vial shrugged. I like Osric, she said, but he insists he wants to call him Conlead. I like Osric, Lyanna said. If I am not mistaken, it's an old name in the old tongue. Doesn't it mean Great King or something like that? I think it does, actually, she said, which is why I like it. In this babe's veins will flow the blood of old Valyria and the Dragon Kings and the blood of the first men and the Kings of Winter. I thought it fitting. Lyanna nodded. I like it. But I must admit I like Conlead best too. What does it mean? Small flame, she replied instantly. Brandon wants to call him like that because I am resistant to fire and I quote, how terrific it'd be to have a Stark immune to fire. Lyanna laughed, throwing her head back, not differently of how Brandon did when he found something genuinely funny. Oh gods, that was absurd. Do it again. She took a breath and imitated her husband's voice and accent. How terrific it'd be to have a Stark immune to fire, she impersonated, and Lyanna leaned down holding her belly as tears pooled at her eyes from the laughter. They laughed together until they noticed it had started snowing. It was gentle and light. Lyanna held out a hand, palm up, and let the snowdrop fall on her skin. It almost felt like a joyous snowfall, if that made sense at all. It kissed their cheeks and swirled around them. Perhaps it'd be better if we headed back inside, Lyanna offered. We don't want you and Small or Sick or Conlead, but not Dana, please, get cold. Lyanna helped to her feet and guided her outside of the ruins at the feet of the broken tower, and together, arm in arm, they headed inside. For a girl, what about a Targaryen name? Lyanna asked. Then like Elena or Alysanne? I like Elena, she breathed out. But do you think Brandon would accept a Targaryen name? He accepted a Targaryen bride, didn't he? Vial smiled softly, looking down. He had indeed. Notes. As always, let me know what you thought of it. Next chapter, the Friday after the next. Sending all my love, G. Chapter 14, Elia 3. Summary. The birth of Aegon. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Elia 3. The wail of the babe was the second best sound she had ever heard after the sound of Rhaenys coming screaming into the world. She had entered into labor in the first hour of the day, and she had started pushing, as per midwife orders, only well after the middle of the night. The babe had finally been born with the first rays of the new day. In that moment she cared not if the babe was female or male, she just felt blessed that her child was alive, that she had managed, this time, to carry the babe to full term. Yet the midwife smiled at her broadly. Congratulations, Your Highness, she proclaimed, you have given birth to an healthy boy, the new Prince of Dragonstone. And Elia felt as if the dam had broken and started crying, and as tears of joy came streaming down her face, as Ashura dried her brow with a warm cloth. Call my husband, Elia demanded. Tell him we have our little prince, she sobbed as she held her arms out for the babe. He must first be bathed, Your Highness, the midwife said, offering her child in another woman's arms, as if she had any right to hold her child before she did. Meanwhile we shall change your sheets and your clothes, for they are stained and sweaty. The woman spoke with authority, and really Elia was just too happy the child was healthy and alive and a boy to even care about all the rest. Go with my son, Ashura, she demanded. Bring him back to me, she pleaded. She saw Ashura's sparkling purple eyes filling with happy tears as she moved to follow the midwife to the bathing chamber for the babe. Elia humored them as they helped her stand up and worked around her, no matter her wobbly legs, and washed her with a warm, clean cloth, helping her standing up and helping her don on a white nightgown with a pale purple string on the sleeves and the waist. One of her handmaidens, a girl named Janera, washed her long hair, braiding them still wet and twisting them on a knot on the top of her head, as the other handmaidens changed the bloody sheets of the bed and helped her back inside. The maester had told them that Elia was not to be stressed too much, neither in the early stages of her pregnancy, neither in the immediate aftermath of the birth. Now she demanded, "Give me my son," she ordered, "and call my husband. He must be made aware of his heir birth." The midwife looked to be about to reproach her. "He is with the wet nurse now." "No wet nurses, Iris," she told her sternly. "I breastfed Rhaenys and I will do the same for my son. Bring him to me." When they did not move, Elia felt her face morph into stone. "Did I stutter?" she demanded. "Give me my son and begone," she ordered. When they still didn't obey, Ashura came at her rescue. "Have you heard the princess? Or do you wish to be whipped by order of His Highness the Prince because you are causing strife to the mother of his heir?" That snapped them into order quite quickly. And not even 3 minutes after that, Ashura returned with her son in her arms. She leaned in and offered her the babe. "He is most beautiful, Your Highness," she said, her voice thick with emotions. "He shall be quite the heartthrob once he is grown. He has the Martell chin and nose but the Targaryen hair." Rhaegar had been a bit disappointed when Rhaenys had been born all dark and chestnut like her mother, though he had grown to love her immensely anyway. "He shall be pleased that his heir and son has inherited at the very least his silver hair," she thought as she held her babe at her breast. The babe was small but clearly healthy. He had a mop of silver hair on his head, the cause of her acid reflux during the last stages of her pregnancy if the midwife was to be listened to, and he was as pale as milk, though he did have her mother's nose and Oberyn's chin. He had Rhaegar's ears though, small and even-shaped, and his small hands with long and slender, for as slender as a babe fingers could be, fingers. Elia lulled him and he opened one of his eyes. They were still watery but they were the most bright violet she had ever seen. It made her want to cry all over again. "Hello, my son," she said, cuddling him in her embrace. "Welcome to this world." She kissed his forehead lovingly. "We have been expecting you." In that moment Rhaegar strode inside. His silver hair were in disarray, sticking in all directions, and his violet eyes looked almost spirited. His pale cheeks were rosy because he must have run all the way to her chambers. Elia smiled at him broadly. "Come forth, my love," she offered, cuddling their son. "Come meet your son." She saw the moment the word registered in his mind. She knew that the maester, who had helped her deliver the babe, must have gone to him to announce the birth of their son, and yet he must have had trouble believing it until that moment. His handsome face broke into a bright responding grin and he came closer to her bed. Elia showed him the babe, wrapped in a black cloth on which it was embroidered the Targaryen sigil. Elia had stitched it herself, and noticing the silver hair. "He has my mother's nose," she told him, "and Oberyn's chin," she added. "But he does have your hair and eyes," she promised him, "and your ears," she teased him with a smile. "He is perfect," he promised her. "Our Aegon, our Azor Ahai," he added, "and you, my wife, look enchanting," he complimented her, bringing one of her hands to his lips to kiss it. "May I?" "He is your son," she told him. "You should." She then offered him the babe, helping him balance the small head in the crook of his elbow. Then Rhaegar straightened. "Hello, my son," he cooed. "The gods took their time with you," he added, "but you are our prince, the prince that was promised, Azor Ahai reborn, and you shall one bring the dawn." Elia felt a chill run down her spine but refused to let Rhaegar love for prophesy stain that wondrous day in which their son had finally been born, so she smiled. "Would you write a song for him, my love?" she asked, scooting over to make room for him and the child he was embracing. He sat beside her, their son balanced in his arms. Their small Rhaenys would met her brother later as she was now still sleeping soundly. "He needn't me to write him one," he told her sweetly, offering her the child back, "for his is the song of ice and fire." Elia smiled and pressed a kiss to the crown of Aegon's hair. "Will you play it for us?" she asked, and Rhaegar nodded, pressing a kiss on her lips. "Just rest now, wife." Elia smiled, tired and starting to nod off. "I love you," she told him. She fell asleep before she could hear him tell her the same. Notes. Here we are. Let me know what you think of it. Aegon is born and now things start to get interesting. Next up, a chapter by Shara POV. Sending all my love, G. Chapter 15, Shara 2. Summary. Shara witnessed something and mulls over her plot to get Viel back south. Notes. Enjoy. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Shara 2. She watched from the window of the immense library of Winterfell as Lord Brandon and Princess Vielle welcomed the people inside of Winterfell. She sighed. She had seen way too much and she really couldn't be moved to care much about all of it. She had to get her princess away from these savages, the sooner the better, though her pregnancy had put a stop to their plots to get her back where she rightfully belonged. In King's Landing, married to one of her brothers, preferably to Inez, who loved her without question, and possibly one day becoming queen. Aerys had said more than once that Rhaegar could easily be put aside and another son could take the throne after his death. Her only consolation, taken away her princess' happiness, which made her both happy and sick in the stomach because she couldn't share in that happiness, was that Maester Wallace was quite sure it might be a girl, no matter that Lady Lyra seemed convinced, as Lord Benjen, that the child would be male. "You look worried, cousin." She turned to Maester Wallace and nodded. "I am. Who are all these people? I thought the North was a desolate land with little to none people manning it. Look how much of them there are," she added, gesturing to the crowd outside of Winterfell. The children of the forest, yes, they were real, had been the first to leave their wooden homes in the woods to make camp outside of Winterfell, mingling with the Northerners and offering what help they could to the expecting mother. Why, against Shara's own counsel, the princess had chosen to take a midwife from the children of the forest, instead of just trusting in Maester Wallace. "Maester Wallace is yet young, Shara," her princess had told her. "Leaf has seen many Starks being born, she has helped Stark's mother birthing them for centuries. She helped Lady Lyra deliver Brandon and his siblings," she had added. "An expert more is best than an expert less." And how could Shara tell her that she didn't trust these creatures to want the best for her? Why, the midwife kept calling her Dragon Girl as if it was some great insult instead of something to rejoice about. What more, who knew what maladies did these people bring with themselves? Maester Wallace shared her worries, though he was not as listened as a maester should be by the occupants of the keep. "Those are the tribes of shamans of the mountains," Maester Wallace told her. "Those four you see at the head of the procession are the elders and leaders of the four clans. They live their lives in the mountains naked or wrapped in pelts and furs. They rather the company of direwolves, panther men and dwarfs to that of men." "Panther men," she blinked, "unsure dwarfs." "Panther men are skin changers who lives in the deep of the woods of the north, and near the frozen ford," he added. "They are a savage population that still does human sacrifices to the old gods of winter," he explained. Shara felt as if about to faint, especially when she saw one of those panther men change from panther to men, stark naked before Princess Vielle, and offering her, still in the nude, the bones of some animal. Dwarfs, she needed a distraction. "Yes, and not like Lord Lannister's youngest son," he explained to her. "Dwavers who live in the caves underneath the mountains Carhold," he added, "near the grey cliffs. They live underneath the earth and they are divided in counties governed by an earl who is named by blood. All 13 counties are united under one high earl who is pledged to House Stark and House Karstark." Maester Wallace made a self-deprecating face. "They usually should coordinate with me for anything they might need of the Starks, but they don't trust outsiders or Southerners. I suppose if you ever were to call Lord Tyrion a dwarf in their presence they would get offended enough to start throwing punches, and they don't hold back against women. Their own women are twice as strong and belligerent as the worst of Northmen." Shara felt even fainter. Dwarf women throwing punches. No, she needed to get Princess Vielle away from the north as soon as possible. "To not talk of the giants," he added. "I cannot reason with those," he said. "They only speak the old tongue, same as the panther men and shamans, while dwarfs speak a whole different, sacred language that they do not share with strangers, and with the northerners they speak only old tongue. But the giants are the worst. They think they can read the sky and they offer their stupidities like prophecies. All those," he said, gesturing to them all, "they do not come every time a Stark is born. They came because the giants have been sending word out that Princess Vielle will give Lord Brandon stars to guide his path. The people of North take this kind of talk quite seriously." Shara felt herself pale. Princess Vielle seemed convinced that the babe could be a boy and had confided to her that Lord Brandon was sure about it. How would the Starks take it if she was to deliver a girl? She had never thought to ask, but King Aerys had not been overly supportive when his first grandchild, Princess Rhaenys, had been born. Maester Wallace hesitated and Lady Shara felt the earth shift under her feet. Would they kill the babe until a boy was born first? It seemed like something those savages people would do. Oh gods, may the mother have mercy. You mean they could do something to the princess or the babe? She asked suddenly in panic. Maester Wallace shook his head. I hope not, but we must move quickly, he said. As soon as the babe is born we shall find a way to get the princess free of Lord Brandon and of the Starks, or I am fearful of what might happen, he said. Shara felt herself pale still. Then a thought hit her. My sister says she will be present at Harrenhal in the entourage of the king, at the great tourney of Lord Went, she said. Perhaps we can find a way to speak with the king or the queen or even Prince Roger and manage to save her, she offered. Her cousin nodded. I hope so, my lady cousin. I truly hope so. She was brushing Princess Avilia's hair with lemon tree oil and lavender oil when suddenly she spoke up, showing her a new necklace she had gotten from the small retinue of dwarfs, led by a dwarf woman. It was quite beautiful. It resembled a crown upside down with spikes of dark jewels that shone dark and looming as she moved it. At the center of it dangled a teardrop-shaped light azure diamond with two smaller diamond-shaped jewels which were the only gems shining with light instead of darkness. The gems were held together by what looked like Valyrian steel. Isn't it beautiful? The master jewelers of the Semrus Freithofen, it means stronghold of winter, and Elis Cathlan has told me it was forged with dwarfen steel an age ago for a Stark princess who tragically died before wearing it, and they deemed it fit to gift it to me since I am a princess by blood and Stark by marriage. Isn't it great? She asked, her expression dreamy. The only thing Shara could think about was how those dwarfs had saw fit to gift lesser than good jewelry. Shouldn't it shine more? And be made of gold instead of steel, to her princess when the piece was made for a wild princess who died and therefore would bring bad luck. Oath, she said, pressing a hand to her surprisingly big middle. She was around the 6th moon now, yet the child could already be seen moving inside her belly. Your father is coming, is he not? She giggled, and, sure enough, a moment later Lord Brandon strode inside their chamber. Shara still couldn't wrap her head around the fact that they kept sharing a chamber even after the first period of marriage. By all customs they should now live in separate quarters, share the meals if they wanted, but lead separate lives as most nobles did. Instead it looked like these Stark did everything together. Either that or they wanted to claw their fangs in Princess Avilia so deep that she might never abandon them. He smiled brightly at her. Hello, husband, she told him with her purple eyes shining. We were expecting you, she added, gesturing to her protunding belly. He let out a full laugh that Shara considered improper of a man of such an high standing. And I've been missing you, he added, resting his long sword ice, who by Maester Wallace and her understanding should still be Lord Ricard's, as well. Both of you, my Bunnerman and my Min Vavuk. How are you feeling? He asked. Do you feel up for the banquet? The princess nodded and he smiled at her. We could always just ditch the banquet and lay in tonight. Our guests won't be mad, he offered suggestively, making Shara's blood boil as he dragged a hand up and down Princess Avilia's arm. Oh, stop it, you big oaf of an husband, she said, her tone filled with fondness. I love you, but we need to be present. They voyaged all this way to give their best wishes for our child. Be present during the banquet is the very least we can do. Her princess was oh so reasonable and sensible. She really didn't belong in this place. She belonged home, in a big palace, with a flock of well-behaved children who didn't bring savage beasts home from playing outside as Lord Brandon had done with that beast that had attacked Sir Selhino, and beloved by a man who was above this one baser impulses and improper behavior. As you wish, Bunnerman, though the bed does look inviting at least half as you do, he told her, twirling a curl of silver hair, and Shara had to bite her tongue lest she reminded them that coupling during a pregnancy was highly frowned upon and could hurt the babe. Not that it seemed to do any good, she had told privately to the princess, but she had assured her that she felt fine and that Leif had told her there would be no problem in laying with her husband even during her pregnancy, especially in the later stages. Madness. They were putting her princess in peril and she would show them no mercy if something befell her because of their foolish behavior. Notes. Here we are. As always, let me know what you think of it. Shara, your princess is fine, dandy and happy where she is. Stop being a party pooper. Guys, if any of you is interested, I just posted a new story. Feral G4 is always the Pietra dello Scandalo, meaning the one with the idea and I am the one putting it down. I leave you the link. It always talks about a more powerful North, but this one has Rob as main character and we mix characters and elements from both Asoyaf and Lata, and we explore polyamorous relationship as well with a ship I had not seen coming at all, like ever. I leave you the link down if you wish to go have a look and tell me what you think of it. https://archiveophone.org/works/3141389/chapters/776915990. As always, sending all my love, G. Chapter 16, Brandon 4. Summary. Surprise guest at Winterfell. Notes. Enjoy. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Brandon 4. He sat near the dark pond under the weirdwood tree, ice balanced in between his legs and the whetstone in his hand as he passed it on the blade. The wind rustling in the leaves reminded him of the first time he had come here with Vial, his wife, and of the time that had passed since. The first time he had seen the woman who would become his wife, he had just seen a tiny princess, wrapped in her house colors, with her curls in disarray for the winds and the way she had rode on horseback inside of Winterfell instead that inside the carriage, her eyes shining purple with merriment. His wife was so free it was almost unbelievable. She was dutiful and mindful of her place in the society, but she also knew how to laugh and how to reach out to the people around her with her words. Her temper was easily incensed and she could as much relieve as wound lethally with her words, for they were always so sharp that they could cut worse than a knife. Brandon had found himself on the bad end of her temper more than once, especially in the last 2.5 moons. With the arrivals of the convoys to Winterfell, the keep was boistering with life, something quite different from the peaceful and quiet place Vial had supposed it would be during the last stages of her pregnancy, and, though Leaf was convinced his wife would carry his heir healthy and that both mother and child would be fine, Brandon could not help but worry, especially since Vial was concerned as well, what with the difficulties her mother had carrying her and her siblings not only to term, but delivering each babe healthy. Vial herself had not been born healthy, and the maesters and midwives had been convinced she would not survive her first night in this world because she struggled to breathe. The closer the date of the birth grew, the worse Vial temper got, and even if they had decided for not to observe the period of isolation in the beginning of the pregnancy, Vial had decided she indeed needed it, and 6 days ago she had pushed him out of her chambers, inside of which only women were admitted, and Brandon missed her the same way he missed the breath in his lungs when he dueled so hard he could scarcely breathe. His temper was none the better for it. He had crushed both Selhino and most of the men in the garrison of guard to Winterfell and the visiting lords who had dared to accept to duel against him. The only one who had proved a bit of a challenge had been Jon Umber, who stood a couple of inches taller than him and with his giant descent ancestry was almost as strong as Brandon, even if in the end Brandon had managed to defeat him too. The more time passed, the more he grew easily upset and brooding, to the point that both Benjen and Lyanna had started to tease him that he was becoming like Ned. "That brooding, foolish and sappy sot," he murmured in between breaths, as if, "I do hope you are not talking about me, brother, otherwise I might feel offended." Brandon twisted and almost left ice to fall on the ground or into the pond in surprise. His brother stood there leaning against a tree trunk. His long, stern face was twisted in a smile, and Ned looked a bit more carefree than he had when he had departed from Winterfell all those years ago to become the ward of Lord Jon Arryn. It looked like the time spent in the Vale had agreed with his brother because he looked better, a man grown, and the smile on his lips was genuine. "Ned," he exclaimed, "we weren't waiting you for another couple of weeks," he added, standing up and reaching his brother in a couple of long strides. He outstretched his hands and gripped him to the shoulders, crashing him against himself and embracing him fiercely. Ned was so quiet and reserved that when he was present you often overlooked him, but when he was absent his absence could be felt all around them. He was so stable and composed that Brandon had never could have helped but rely on him most. Ned perhaps was not blessed either with the command of the North as Brandon had, neither with the green searing like Benjen, yet in his quiet brother Brandon had faith as much as in his own bond with the North and in Benjen's visions, because he was honorable and just, and Brandon could not imagine a luckier lord and warden to have such a brother and advisor as Ned was and would grown to be. Ned patted his back and chuckled. "I was told I missed one of the most enchanting weddings of the last century in Winterfell," he commented as Brandon distanced him from his chest to study him. "They said the snow cloaked you both and that Charlotte has taken to your wife as a babe to milk." Brandon smirked. "And I left a little brother no taller than this much," he waved a hand, "and now a man stands before me." Ned shrugged. "So, it looks like father's insistence in having you take a Targaryen bride paid off," he said. "I am told you are quite enamored with her." Brandon smiled broadly. "Oh, I am," he exclaimed. "You will like her very much, believe me. She's able to enchant anyone around her. I really stood no chance, and I realized it the moment she rode inside of Winterfell and I laid eyes on her." "I might have become a man," Ned commented, but you, my brother, have become a poet and of the worst kind, the genuine kind. Brandon let out a boisterous laugh. Ned nodded to him. I had hoped to come before the birth of your child, he said. I wanted to surprise you all. Besides, matters in Riverrun went smoothly. There was something there, in his brother's gaze, that had Brandon arch a brow. What happened? I might have duelled with the ward of Lord Hoster Tully, Ned commented, and Brandon gaped at him, blinking in surprise. Ned almost blushed. Well, he challenged me to a duel for Lady Catelyn's hand. Brandon smiled. I'm supposing we are free of the sod then. Well, we should be free of his advances, that is for sure, he commented, if he survives the wound I have procured to him. There was some odd sort of dark pride to his brother, and Brandon was reminded of Charlotte. The fact that Ned was quiet and better-mannered than both him and Lyanna did not mean he was less of a wolf, after all. Do tell. The boy stood little chance. He is way too slim and untrained, he explained. I really ought to have pulled my punch a little, but he had challenged me to the death. I cut him from the collarbones to the belly button, he added. I was about to finish him when Lady Catelyn stepped in and asked that I spare him out of love for her, he added, telling me he was just a boy and a brother. Brandon arched a brow, an expression he had picked from his wife, as he leaned down to pick up ice and seethe it in its scabbard again. Then he walked to his brother and passed his arm around Ned's shoulder. Well, my brother has become a man indeed. What's next? Lyanna getting married? By the way, Ned's face fell. Brandon stopped in his tracks, blinking. Gods, truly? He asked. He didn't even approach the matter with me, he commented. Does he have already a match in mind for her? Ned nodded. I know, and I had hoped that with you and I both either married or to be married soon he might lay off Lyanna a bit, but it looks like that will not be the case, he added. As soon as I told him that the betrothal with Lady Catelyn Tully was a done thing, he told me to start inquire for matches for her, he said, and, well, a suitor has already come forward. Brandon blinked. Who's the nut who'd rush to get married to a she-wolf? He asked, unsure. Ned shrugged his arm off. Robert Baratheon, he said, and Brandon felt his stomach twisting in knots. Look, I know how it sounds. I know you know about Robert's adventures, but you cannot fault him. Those, you yourself were seldom inexperienced when you married your wife, Ned defended, and Brandon seethed. I never put a babe in any of them, he protested, and besides I never had a dalliance long enough to risk it. It only takes one time, Brandon, Ned recriminated. Besides, what about Barbary? Brandon felt as if punched when Ned pointed out his affair with the now Lady Dustin. That is a low blow, he said, pointing an accusing finger to his brother. Barbary and I were childhood sweethearts, and still I made sure she took precautions, he added. Ned arched a brow. Not always the precautions taken are enough. Are you really judging Robert based on his dalliances before marriage? He seems serious about Lyanna. He has never even seen her. He is just enamored with the prospect of being your brother in truth, isn't he? He demanded, feeling the fury taking root in his mind. Ned gaped like a fish. Brandon, Robert might not love Lyanna now, but I know him. He is good, he would respect her, and he could even grow to love her. Besides, father would approve of such a match for Lyanna, which would mean that there'll be little strife, and Robert could even humor Lyanna's wildest side. He is willing, he said, more willing than you were when father arranged your marriage to your wife. Would you take away from Lyanna that possibility? Ned added. Brandon gaped in surprise. It's different. Ned crossed his arms over his chest. How? Both Vial and I are older than Lyanna is. Vial is what, 2.5 years older than Lyanna? Ned demanded, and Robert is my best friend. I trust him, and he is my age. If I can get betrothed, so can Robert and Lyanna. Besides, Robert is willing to wait some time before the marriage with Lyanna, which would ensure her a couple of years to keep doing what she wants. Brandon seethed. He would crush her, you know he will. He is no wolf. Wolves mate for life. Neither is a Vial, Ned pointed out, yet no one is daring to put in discussion your marriage. That shut him up quite quickly, as the image of his wife with her hand engulfed by the flame of the torch, her skin unmarred by the fire. His wife was not a wolf, she was a dragon. She even had the resistance to fire of the Targaryen, yet Brandon knew he could trust her completely. Charlotte had taken to her immediately, which meant she was his. Brandon had known from the moment he had started imagining her with a child their own. Just give him a chance, brother, Ned implored him. He is better than you think, and he would love and cherish her. He trusted Ned's judgment, so he nodded. Fine, he said, as they left the Godswood behind them and walked in the courtyard of Winterfell back to the keep. Lyanna was right, You are snappy, is it because you miss your wife? Ned asked as they walked side by side in the corridors of the keep, nodding to the servants and guests that greeted them on their way. Brandon rolled his eyes. He admitted, she has banished me from her chamber and means to stay isolated until the babe is born, he explained, which she is afraid it could be any moment now since she too was born early. What says Leaf? Ned asked as they found a spot at the table in the Great Hall of Winterfell. They did not sit by themselves for long as two dwarfs and a dwarf woman approached them, and though the dwarfs were isolated and quiet by nature, they were soon joined by two men from the shaman's tribes. She has faith that Viel will deliver the babe safely and healthy, he replied, but Viel can't help but worry, what with her mother's history with pregnancies. Ned nodded and accepted the cup of mead the one of the shamans, a man named Longfen, offered to him while the dwarfs enjoyed their dark wine, a wine very strong mixed with fermented goat milk. A kind of beverage Bran had gotten drunk to more than once when he had been sent to the dwarfs by his father. Well, I have faith in Leaf, Ned commented. I've also seen Mahonia around, he added. With their expertise I am sure Viel has nothing to fear, he added. Winterfell was yet to be pushed to its limit, though it was quite full, what with children, shamans and dwarfs. The pantherman and women were camped outside of the keep, since they'd rather sleep with the stars above them instead that encrumped inside stone walls. He nodded, yet the moment Selhino entered the hall with that panicked look in his dark violet eyes, Brandon stood up rigidly, fisting his hands to his hips. Selhino skipped to them, and Brandon could swear he knew what he was about to say long before the words left his mouth. She's in labor. Brandon had never run faster in his whole life. He reached his wife's rooms in a matter of seconds that felt more like years. Outside of it his brother, Benjen, was awaiting patiently with his father. The moment the first scream hit him he launched himself to the door, but his father and Ned both held him back, shoving him a couple of steps back. Let me in, he demanded. I know it's difficult, child, his father told him in a tone that was supposed to be reassuring but only set him on edge worse. I know, but the best thing you can do now is waiting. A birthing chamber is no place for a man. Brandon nodded and tried to be reasonable, but the moment his wife's voice cut the air from inside the chambers calling his name, all ploys were done. He made to reach the door, but Ned stood between him and the door again. She's calling for me. It's normal, Brandon, Ned tried to reason with him, but that does not mean you have to barge in. You are going to add to her stress with the way you are now. And Brandon was almost convinced, but his wife's cry cut through the door again. He fixed his grey eyes on Ned and seethed. Ned, I love you, little brother, and I don't want to hurt you. But if you don't stand aside now, I'm going to force you out of the way. You choose. Ned crossed his arms before his chest just as one of the dwarfs who had just reached them interjected. Let him pass for the old gods. He exclaimed, a woman should never face birth alone if she calls for her husband, he added. Only when Brandon was readying himself to force Ned out of the way, Benjen stood up. Let him through. The voice wasn't Benjen's but Lyanna's. His little sister wore a white cloth over her dress and it was stained with blood. Her face was pale and her eyes shone. Let him through, she repeated. Now. That's preposterous, his father exclaimed as Ned took to the side. Brandon did not care to look back to his father as he followed Lyanna inside the antechamber and the birthing chamber of his wife just as a wail rippled through the air, stopping him in his tracks. Well done, Dragon Girl. Leaf exclaimed. And that's one of the way, she added, one still to go. But Brandon could not compute nothing but the scene before his very eyes. His wife was not abed, but leaning against the feet-board of their bed, her hands gripping it with a force to him unknown, her nightgown stained red and wet, her dainty, little feet were on 2 blocks of wood and she was half crunched in a position that looked uncomfortable, a bloody pillow under her. A veil of sweat shone on her face and her curls of moonlight were held on the top of her head with a hairpin, some loose curls matted against her neck and her forehead. She smiled tiredly at him, but before Brandon could say nothing his mother was before him holding out a babe to him. Brandon could do nothing but follow the guidance of her expert hands as she put the baby in his unexperienced arms, showing him out to support the head. The babe was wrapped in a cloth of stark grey with a black direwolf stitched on it. The direwolf was clearly Charlotte, and by the way it was stitched he knew it was his wife's work. Lady Shara was using a wet cloth to clean his wife's face and Brandon envied her that for a moment. But the moment his child wailed in his arms demanding his attention, Brandon looked down to his perfect face, a bit long perhaps for a babe and so very red and crinkled, small hands with uneven nails digging in his chest as the babe wriggled a bit in his arms. Your son, child, his mother told him kindly as Leaf reached Vial again and crunched before her. You've got to push, Dragon Girl, You knew this would come, Leaf told his wife, and Vial nodded, steeling herself once again and blinking away the tears of pain from her purple eyes. You are doing amazing, Your Highness, Shara told her, her tone so sweet that Brandon could swear he had never heard her sound so odd. His wife cried out again, her scream filling him with dread and wonder as another child, there were two of them, was pushed out of her, Leaf's hands welcoming and accompanying the babe's fall to the pillow. Well done, Dragon Girl. Leaf exclaimed. Help me put her on the chair, she demanded, and Mahonia, helped by the midwife and the Maester, dragged the chair behind his wife. Brandon had never seen Maester Wallace look either so perturbed, neither so cooperative. It looked like someone must have knocked some sense into him during the birth. The babe was still bound to the mother by the cordon as Lady Shara helped his wife sit on the chair. Leaf did not even bother to clean the child. Another boy, Dragon Girl, she said, you did good. The stars in the sky shall shine brighter tonight. Brandon felt as if he could faint was it not for the infant in his arms. Vial sighed in contentment as if she had not been screaming her lungs out a moment ago as Lady Shara pushed her curls from her forehead and as Leaf delivered the child to her arms. Leaf stood up as soon as Vial racked a hand under the babe's behind, gently and rhythmically drumming on it, her hand covering his small feet. Come forward, Brandon of House Stark, she said, your sons need their mother. Brandon walked as if entranced to his wife's chair and fell to his knees before her, standing as tall as her seated on the chair. Vial smiled at him as Leaf covered the babe in another cloth of grey with shallots stitched upon it. The presence of two sets of cloth suggested to him that his wife had some explaining to do. She smiled at him, her eyes shining brighter than any amethyst. Surprise, she breathed out with a heavy breath. Do not tire yourself out, Your Highness, Lady Shara told her, someone should call the wet nurse. No wet nurses, Vial breathed out, I shall nurse my children to my own breast. But, Your Highness. Lady Shara and the Maester both tried to reason, but Brandon would not have it. If his wife wanted to nurse their children to her breast she would, and he'd have no one try and pester her about it. Silence, he demanded as he helped her balance the firstborn child in her embrace too, the twins both cuddled on her chest and breathing in tandem with her. If my wife wants to nurse our children herself you'll shut up and let her do what she feels best, he demanded. Vial gave him a grateful smile as Brandon cradled in one hand the head of his second-born. He looked up at his wife and found her smiling at him already. He leaned in to steal a kiss from her lips, stopping him short of deepening, knowing her breathing problems could get worse after such a stress was put on her body. So, he said, there's two of them, care to explain how you knew about that beforehand and told me nothing? Vial smiled at him and pressed a kiss to his bearded cheek. Well, I did dream of them, she told him, and knew there were two of them. Leaf confirmed it for me, I wanted to surprise you. Brandon gave her a broad smile and observed his children with a smile on his lips. His firstborn was slightly bigger than the second-born. He had a mop of dark hair on his small head and his eyes half opened were already a greyish-blue hue. His second-born instead looked completely different. To his surprise he looked more like his wife. He did have her chin, though the firstborn had inherited her button nose while their second-born had inherited his long, stark nose, but on his head there was a whip of silver blondish hair and his eyes open as he quietly looked at the world. Around him were already as grey as that of his brother. I suppose you have thought of names too, have you not, Bunner man? She smiled at him. Well, if you are amenable, she offered. This one could be Osric Stark, she offered, caressing the head of dark hair of their firstborn. Brandon smiled. A more than mighty and worthy name, he commented. Vial smiled and caressed the silverly blonde soft hair of their second-born while he could be Conlead Stark. Brandon smiled brightly. Despite it not being a proper northern name like Osric, he had fallen in love with the name Conlead the moment he had read it. It was supposed to mean small flame, and with the way his wife was resistant to fire, Brandon had thought it fitting even if Vial had strung him along battling with him because she wanted to call the babe Osric instead of Conlead. Turned out that both of them were satisfied. Osric and Conlead Stark, he repeated, my two little wolves. Vial smiled softly. They are dragons too, she told him tiredly. Look at this one here, she added, caressing Conlead back. Brandon smiled. But he has the Stark's eyes. Vial smiled. He's going to steal a great numbers of hearts when he gets older with silver hair and grey eyes, she commented softly. And Brandon could not help but smile. After what felt an eternity his mother grabbed his shoulder. You should go out and announce their birth, she said. I shall help Vial with her nightgown and with the babes. You can return immediately after, she interjected before Brandon could protest that he didn't want to leave them. He kissed Vial's forehead and walked through the antechamber and out of the door. Ned, Benjen, his father, a representative of the dwarfs, as Selhino as Longfang were all present. He smiled at them. She gave birth to twins, he announced, 2 healthy baby boys. He continued, seeing the tears shining in his father's eyes. Osric and Conlead Stark, he concluded. The shaman, Longfang, raised his wooden staff in the air. The twin stars of House Stark have come. He exclaimed, winter shall meet his end when slumber will end for the enemy beyond the wall. Long live the stars of House Stark. She will give him stars, to lighten his road when his path darkens. The voice of Fallon, the red-headed giantess, echoed in his mind. The dwarf clapped his hands and started to pound his iron-gloved fist over his chainmail, making it clang. Long live the stars of Winterfell. Notes. So, the children are born. Not 1 but 2, and 2 males. Take that. Heirs the girl you believed not good enough for your sons actually gave in 1 to 2 heirs to her husband and 2 males. As always, let me know what you think of it. Sending all my love. G. Chapter 17, Elia 4. Summary. Time to see what's happening on Dragonstone. Notes. Enjoy. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Elia 4. Your Highness, called the Maester, barging as she was taking a stroll with Rhaenys and Ashura in Aegon's garden, her son in her arms. She seldom parted from him, still unable to believe, 4 moons into his life, that he was real. That she had her small prince. He is the prince that was promised, his is the song of ice and fire, Rhaegar's word echoed in her head. She turned and looked with an arched brow to the Maester, awaiting to listen to this news he had deemed so important as to barge into her private time with her children. A raven came, Your Highness, he told her, out of breath from Winterfell. Elia smiled broadly. What news of my good sister? She asked, her eyes brightening. She knew Vial had been expecting to, she had written as much to her. Elia missed Vial terribly, and with children so close in age she could easily arrange for a match between them. No one would dare question it, since they would have Targaryen blood. Good news, she went into labor. But, Elia suddenly realized, isn't it a bit early? And she gave birth to healthy baby boys, he told her, smiling broadly. The Maester had cared for Vial since her birth. He had even helped Queen Rolla deliver her into the world. Elia knew he wanted to be the one to deliver one day her children, but she also knew he would content to know she was well cared for. Osric and Conlead Stark. Joy filled her. 2 boys. Vial had surpassed whatever expectation anyone had ever given her. The Maesters had been sure she would not survive her first night into this world, and she had survived for the next 17 years. They had believed her too weak to give male heirs, so heirs had betrothed her to the Stark boy, hoping to insult him with a weak bride and irrevocably linking House Stark and House Targaryen together, and she had given him 2 sons, both healthy, in a matter of a little more than a year. She turned to Ashura. That's amazing. She exclaimed. Have the bells rung for 2 hours, she added, 1 for each boy. We should go and light the candles to wish them prosperity and long life. Ashura nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. She too loved Vial. It was almost impossible not to like Vial, she was just too kind and sweet. Have you given the news to my husband? She asked. Yes, Your Highness, the Maester said, his face turning grim. What happened? She asked. Lord John Connington commented. The Maester told her on how Princess Vial gave the Stark boy 2 sons. Elia knew that John Connington cared nothing for her, though managing to give Rhaegar a son had shut him up for a while. She could only imagine the kind of comments he must have made to her husband. After all, he had tried more than once to convince Rhaegar to take Vial as a wife, a pure Targaryen wife. Only the rumor that Vial would not survive a pregnancy and would surely birth only daughters had stayed their hands. She could imagine the type of comments now that Vial had given her husband not 1 but 2 sons, when Elia had only given Rhaegar a firstborn daughter and a son after many failed pregnancies. It's of no importance. I beg to differ, she said, her voice even. What did Lord Connington have to say about the birth of my nephews? He lamented they had not gone through with the plot to have Princess Vial married to Prince Rhaegar, he admitted, looking down. Elia bristled. And what did my husband reply? The Maester looked uncomfortable before replying. His Highness commented on how what's done is done and there is no point in crying over spilled milk. Something about his expression convinced her that was not all that had happened, if all that had been said. Still, Lord Conington has suggested they might think, if you prove unable of giving any more children, of. I don't dare to rely it, your highness. Elia was a Dornish woman, she carried always a small knife hidden on her person, she did not like to draw it on the maester but if necessary she would dare, instead she told him taking a step closer to him. I don't, your highness he said shaking his head and stepping back besides, his highness rejected the plot then swiftly he excused himself and walked away. Mother. Rhaenys asked tugging at her hand. Elia looked down to her daughter's beautiful doe-like eyes. What happens? Elia shared a long look with Ashura and crunched down to be on the same level as Rhaenys. Your cousins have been born, my little son, she told her 2 baby boys. Can I play with them? She asked looking up at her with her eyes shining. If I have something to say about that you will marry one of them, baby. It would strengthen the bond between House Targaryen and Stark. The whole of the realm respected the Starks if the Targaryen were to be bound to them with not 1 but 2 weddings. The dissidents that now clamored in the shadows could be dealt with swiftly and without blood spent. Together she and Ashura went to the September where they lit the candles to the mother and sung her hymn. They prayed that the father would guide them and give them honor, the warrior to lend them courage and the smith to forge their strength. Rhaenys too lit the candles with them. Elia made sure she wished with the right words fortune to her cousins, calling each of them by name, and then she delivered her to the nursery with her small son still held at her breast. She and Ashura then secluded themselves in her chambers, and as she was breastfeeding Aegon, her golden son, her golden dragon, her husband entered her chambers. She smiled at him, keeping in the back of her mind what the maester had told her. I heard you lit the candles in the September, he said in lieu of greeting. Elia cooed to her boy and then looked up at him. Of course I did, she said. Aren't you glad Vial delivered safely and that her sons are healthy? She asked. Rhaegar nodded. Of course he said, but his voice was hollow and empty. Elia nodded and caressed the back of the silver gold head of her son. Our son will have small playmates, she commented. Maybe one of them could be fostered in Dragonstone when he comes to be of the right age, she added, to foster the bond between the next king of the 7 kingdoms and the north. I am the heir to the Iron Throne and I have only 1 son and a daughter, he commented, closing his hand in a fist. Instead the Warden of the North has already 3 sons and one of them has 2 sons with Targaryen blood. It's unacceptable. Do not worry yourself over this, love, she tried. Look, our son is strong and healthy, she told him, caressing the silver gold head of her boy. She was grateful he had inherited the colors of the Targaryen. If he hadn't and one of Vial's had, by any chance the dragon would truly be woken and she would have to fear your true heir. Besides, inborn girls can inherit. How comes that in the north, he said, where there is more wild than civilization, they manage to have that much sons? He wondered. It has nothing to do with Targaryen blood, since Vial birthed 2 sons in one ago, he reasoned, so it must have to be something to do with the northerners. Or maybe it was only luck. Elia offered. Anyhow, it does not become of us to rue the birth of our nephews, my love, she told him plainly. There is something fishy going on here, Elia, I tell you, he said. Some sorcery. The maesters were sure that Vial could not deliver safely boys and that she would only have daughters if she managed to survive the birth, he told her, and then suddenly she's able to birth not 1 but 2 sons and is healthy and in strength. The only possible reason must be sorcery. I hope you are not accusing the god's mother of our daughter of being a witch, my love. Absolutely not, but I am afraid they might have done some sorcery on her, he said. My sister is too frail and too sweet of disposition to be a witch, but I tell you, the Starks are said to do strange rituals, blood sorcery of old, to ingratiate their old gods. Who knows what they could have done to a Vial? Elia finished nursing her son to her breast and offered him to Ashura, nodding to her to bring him to the nursery. When Ashura was gone, she sauntered to her husband. Can't we just be happy that Vial and the children are fine? She asked. Rhaegar turned, his purple eyes crazed. We can, he said. After you give me the 3rd head of the dragon, he added, capturing her lips with his. Elia deepened the kiss. Let his seed quicken in me again, she prayed the mother and the crone. With his 3rd head he will be satisfied. Later he did not lay with her in their bed, he kissed her brow tender instead, that passionate, and left her chamber just when Ashura was entering it, bringing her Aegon to feed again. Taking into her disheveled appearance, Ashura made a face. Elia guided her son's mouth to her nipple and exhaled when he attached to it without any difficulty. Rhaenys had had some difficulty being born very little and being easily tired, but Aegon had taken to breastfeeding with the simplicity of a strong babe. Didn't the maester advise at least another 4 months? Ashura demanded, her purple eyes shining dangerously. Elia nodded. Yes, she said, but he is desperate for the 3rd head of the dragon, she said. That is still no reason to risk your health, Princess Ashura defended, crossing her arms over her chest. Elia knew her friend was right, but she also knew that risk were to be taken if she wanted to make sure her children were safe. Vial seems happy north, don't you think? She asked, changing topic. Ashura shrugged. It would seem like it, she said. By her letters they treat her well and she is well in love with her husband as he is with her, she added. Why? I never told you, Elia said, but before Vial was sent north, John Connington had tried to convince Roriger to take her as a second wife since I had been able to give him only Rhaenys, she murmured. Ashura made a face, but did not say anything, so she continued. It was why the Maester studied her health, so she said, but by the time they had the answer I was pregnant again and Roriger could not set my aside as simply with a second wife, nor try to stress me, she added. Ashura nodded. She remembered how dark had been the days after Princess Elia had lost that child. What more, the Maesters told us Vial could easily lose her life during the birth and that she was able to carry only daughters. A pregnant wife, was certainly better than a woman able to give him only daughters, she said. As you know, I was very invested in having Vial close, and within is loving her, so I had suggested to Roriger that he signed a pact within is in which his brother promised to never rise arms against him if Roriger secured for him a marriage to Vial. Ashura frowned. Elia looked down to her son, easily nursing at her breast. It seemed like a good idea at the time, she said. Innis loved Vial, she would stay near and he would do his best to make her happy, she added, and if they were able to have only daughters, even if someone tried to dethrone Roriger if he had signed such a contract. Ashura nodded, clearly seeing their point. Unbeknownst to us, she said, Aerys had already starting to discuss the betrothal to Brandon Stark, and against the king's word we could do nothing. Without a male heir, Roriger did not feel prudent to try and dethrone Aerys, and we had to let her go. Is it that what the Maester was talking about? Ashura asked. I fear that if I don't give Roriger his third head of the dragon, he might be talked into annulling Vial's marriage to Brandon Stark and take her as a wife and set me and my children aside, especially now that she has birthed safely to him 2 sons, she said. We have to find a way to stop it from happening, she said. Even if you are not able to give him any more children, he would not dare it. Not after Aegon has been born, Ashura reassured her. Elia looked up from her golden son's beautiful face and said nothing. Let him try, she thought. I won't let him rob my children of their birthright. Her children were her life, and by crook or nook she would make sure they led happy life in their belonging place. Aegon as king of the 7 kingdoms, and if it was necessary and helped strengthen the bond with the north, she could betroth Rhaenys to one of Vial's boys. Or, if she had another daughter like Roriger kept pestering her about, she could betroth that one to one of Vial's boys, and Rhaenys and Aegon would sit on the Iron Throne. That was the most desirable outcome. We have to help Vial staying north, she said, foster friendship between her sons and my children as it was always supposed to be. Another child would keep Roriger near me and Vial happy and safe north. My children would be safe. Ashura nodded. Notes. Here we are. The news of Vial and her children has raised some problem around the 7K, to begin with the royal family, and what of the court, I wonder. What will happen? As always, let me know what you think of it, and sending all my love. G. Chapter 18, Inizai and Vial 6. Summary. The news of Vial's birth reaches KL. Vial and Brandon, a small snippet of love. Notes. Enjoy. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Inizai. The news of the birth of Vial's sons had flew fast from Winterfell to the Red Keep. So fast to the point that Inez had known of the birth of her sons, the children that should have been his, so soon that had he had a dragon he could have flown to Winterfell himself and burn it to the ground, take his bride back and put in her belly as many children as she would give him. A new dynasty all of his own. But Inez did not have a dragon. His bride had been stolen from him. He wanted her back. He nodded stiffly to his father's Kingsguard and barged into his solar. His father was the same way he had been since he had been a young boy. Hair too long and frizzy to even resemble his, purple and spirited eyes, nails longer than a blade, and a long, frizzy beard that reached his belly. His crown askance on his head as a girl's head bobbed up and down on his crotch. Father, he exclaimed, tell me it's not true. His voice sent the girl scrambling to her feet. His father gestured for her to go. Viserys was there as well and let out a dark chuckle. What did I tell you, father? That he would barge here and demand an explanation. He gave the girl a couple of copper coins and she went away, her hips sauntering as she walked. She could almost pass for a Valyar with her fair hair and skin. Their father nodded almost absent. I can trust only you, my son, Eris told Viserys, his bony hand outstretching to his favorite son. Innis knew he held no place into his father's heart. He had been born too late for that. Rhaegar had been his golden son, up until he had taken for wife the Dornish and give him only a granddaughter and not the grandson he was waiting for. Viserys had been born when Rhaegar had been 10, little but robust, and had easily become their father's golden heir. They shared the same taste. They partook on whores together, and the forked tongues of the Red Keep even had started to say, in the last years, that perhaps if Queen Rhaegar gave a new child to the king it would be disputed if it was the child of king or his son. Then, in rapid succession had come Baelor and a Valyar. Baelor was the saint knight who cared nothing either for politics or power. But he was a great knight. They said between him and Sir Arthur Dane they were the best swordsmen of the world. A Valyar was the girl, always shunned because of her health, but taken into great consideration by all the lords because a marriage to her might raise them up on the ladder. He was just the spare that should have become a maester or a septon. Do not worry, Father, Viserys continued. I always keep my promises, he added, and I will give you the grandchildren you deserve. My seed will give you them, he promised. He then smirked at him, his silver gold hair held back from his face in a long braid, a sword he had named Dragonfey hanging at his hip, his doublet of red and black sharp-shaped, and a coronet around his head sitting on his forehead styled as a snarling dragon. Yes, my son, their father replied. Do the preparations, his purple eyes glistening with some mad light. And if they refuse? Viserys demanded, his brow creasing with a smirk. Burn them all. Viserys walked around him and stopped short of him. Innis was almost as tall as him, but Viserys was stronger, older and more confident. Innis was pretty sure that if it had been Viserys to ask for Viel's hand in marriage their father would have granted it. Instead, since it had been just him, he had been refused. And now his bride had been married off to a savage and had given him not one but 2 sons. You'd do better to make your way to the citadel, brother, Viserys told him, because I am not good at sharing. He scratched his chin and jaw with a hand, especially since it'd be my duty to cleanse any stain on our family honor, as always. Innis tried to spoke to his father after that, but as his father put it, unless he meant to be a man and partake with him and his horse and show him he was a man, he would not listen to him. So Innis was before a choice. The soft, rounded face of Viel blinked into his mind, her light purple eyes and her tear-stricken cheeks as she cried for him to save her. He was supposed to be her husband and her savior. Viserys had wanted nothing to do with her because she would not be able to give him sons. Baelor had been uninterested, only Innis had wanted her. And he was sure she wanted him, she was just too timid and dutiful to admit it. And now she was alone, probably afraid. Who knew in which dark arts they had mingled to get her pregnant with child so soon and with twins boys. He wanted his bride. She was supposed to be his, and he was sure she would understand the sacrifices he made. Very well, father, he conceded. Then I want the blonde one, he said, the one who was serving you before, he added. His father blinked in surprise, then his eyes colored with savage pleasure. All too well, have her called then, he said. I have yet to have her, he added, but for this special occasion, I can give you the joy of her cunt, he told him, though I had hoped to take her for myself. Maybe we can share her after you have become man. Despite his father having renounced any mistress after the birth of his son, he had never stopped embedding how many women he desired, and with them even the mother of his bastard son. So it was that the girl was brought to him. She wore a plain dress of vibrant yellow. Her face was fair but uneven, with dark and red spots over her cheeks and temples. Her lips were too full to be a Valyar's, and her eyes, thought a clear blue, were too blue to pass for light lilac. Her hair fell straight instead of in waves, but so blonde that they were almost the same shade of his. She was tiny of frame, but had round and big breasts that bounced. She had kite nose instead of a button one, but otherwise resembled a Valyar enough for his tastes. Eris demanded she disrobed. When she was too slow to do so, he demanded Innis showed her how to respect a man and tore at her dress. Innis worked through the lump at his throat and held out a hand. I do this for a Valyar, he told himself as he grabbed her corset and tore it with all the strength he had. The fabric tore, the buttons scattered to the ground and the dress hanged open. The tunic was so tight on her bosom it almost seemed to be sprouting from the white linen. Eris laughed at the girl's whimper. Now son, he said, show her a dragon's mercy, he added, take her and make her yours, mark her as the whore she is. And, gods forgive him, he did. He did not hurt her, but he took her pinning her hands over her head. He murmured to her to try and sound scared so that his father would be satisfied of his violent ways. Her eyes had almost shone with fondness at his request and she had obeyed him, even managing to fake crying as she kept her dress closed with a hand, her head bowed as Eris laughed and threw her a gold dragon. That very day at court 4 minor lords were executed for allegation of high treason. The means, as always in the last years, was execution by wildfire. Viserys stood at the left of their father near the Iron Throne while his new hand, Lord Merryweather, did not dare to look at the flaming green corpses. Innis looked to his right at his other brother, Baelor, who was with his hand clasped murmuring a prayer if for the dead or for the king. Innis could not have said. Viserys had been the one to give the order after their father had given him as boon this prerogative. Suddenly, as the servants disposed of the charred bones and corpses, the doors of the throne hall opened and Innis had to force away a smile as his most illustrious and noble brother, the eldest and heir apparent to the Iron Throne, Rhaegar, appeared on the threshold holding a squirming bundle in his arms. Rhaegar had his long silver gold hair flowing down his left side, the right side of his head braided back and held in place by a three-headed dragon pin of Valyrian steel. He wore a doublet of red and black encrusted with rubies and black diamonds. He also sported his coronet. It was far less lavish than their father and brothers, a thick, rectangular band of Valyrian steel with a single drop-shaped ruby over his forehead, his sword at his hip. The bundle in his arms was wrapped in black and red silk, and by his side were John Connington with his red hair and beard, and his wife and daughter. Princess Elia had her long curly hair bouncing on her shoulders and wore a magnificent gown with the martel colors, with a golden necklace with a sparkling sun. She wore a twin coronet similar to that of Rhaegar with one single ruby between her eyebrows, and she held by the hand their daughter, Princess Rhaenys, with her dark locks and almost olive skin, big doe-like eyes, clad in a red and black gown resembling by the cut that of her mother. It was a clear message, the one Elia was sending. She may be a Martell, but her children were Targaryens. Rhaegar for his part tried not to look too disgusted by the scene before him. He sighed. "I was not aware today would be a day of death, your grace," he offered, "or I would have chosen another day to present my son and heir to you." Aerys leaned forward, his bony hands curling around the pommels of the swords fused together for the Iron Throne, the long nails scraping against the metal. Innis observed as his brother stared at their father, his purple gaze unyielding. "It is not a day of death," Viserys countered. "It has been a day of justice," he added. "After all, you could not have chosen a better day indeed." Aerys nodded as if absent. Lord Merryweather looked way too happy to see Rhaegar as his brother surveyed the throne hall. "You should bath your son in wildfire and ashes, son," Aerys proclaimed. "Make him strong." "My son is already strong," Rhaegar replied, his eyes sparkling dangerously. "Father, he needn't to be sullied in the ashes of dead when he is living." Innis thought that since the last time he had seen Rhaegar, when they had discussed their plan to sign that treaty and have Rhaegar bless his union with Vial, his brother had grown bolder, the tension in his shoulders more evident, the distaste for their father equally as so. People had already started to rumor that Rhaegar was just awaiting an heir to dethrone their father, but Innis knew better. If Rhaegar wanted to dethrone Aerys and take the Iron Throne, he'd have to have the support of all his brothers, and Viserys, who everyone knew wanted to be named Crown Prince over Rhaegar, would never accept. Not unless Rhaegar won the throne the hard way. If Rhaegar gave him Vial, Innis would throw his support behind him wholeheartedly. Maybe they could also arrange a betrothal between one of Rhaegar's children and one of theirs, once the matter in the north was disposed of. Their mother, Queen Rhaella, who lately rathered spend her time either in prayer or away from their father, was also in attendance, probably because she knew Rhaegar had landed in King's Landing to present his newborn son. She wore a beautiful gown of red with puffy sleeves and black inserts with rings of Valyrian steel. Her silver gold hair were braided back from her face and held into a tight, elegant bun over her head. A small ruby-encrusted crown circled over her bun, sparkling as much as her purple eyes did when they fell on her favorite son. "We should let them come closer, my love," she cooed to her husband and king. "I heard tale the Valyrian blood runs strong in this child." Aerys made a gesture and Rhaegar came closer, his wife and companions walking one step behind him. The bundle in his arms kept squirming and passing by them. Innis caught Rhaegar's gaze and nodded to him, a smile on his lips. Rhaegar walked the steps that led to the dais and pressed a formal kiss to their mother's cheek, before looking askance at their brother. Viserys leaned forward to look at the child and smirked. "They must have told you tales of lies, mother," he commented. "The child has its mother's dark skin. He smells as Dornish as his sister," he added, looking at their father. The whole of the court held its breath as Roriger balanced the child in his arms and slowly unwrapped him from the red and black silk. Then he turned, giving the back to both their father and brother, and held the child forward so that he was presented to the court. The babe looked healthy and robust, with chubby cheeks and fingers, wrapped in a small robe of black and red. It was true he had his mother olive skin and large nose, but his eyes sparkled purple, and on his head he sported a shock of silver gold hair for all to be seen. Elia had given Roriger not only a son, but a Valyrian-looking one too, and it showed in how proud she beamed to the court. "My son," he said, "the new prince of Dragonstone," Roriger added, "Aegon Targaryen." A murmur broke in the court when the name was declared. It was a king's name. The babe squirmed and then let out a powerful whine, showing everyone how loud he could be and the pair of healthy lungs he had. The people then started clapping, and their brother, Baelor, stepped up offering to lead a prayer for the child. Inez looked up at Roriger with his beaming wife, and swore to himself, that next time it would be him and Vial to be married and present their first child. Baelor rose his hands to the ceiling. "The gods love House Targaryen," he exclaimed. "Not only my brother has a son and heir, but also my sister, Princess Vial, has given birth to 2 healthy baby sons. The gods have blessed our line indeed." Inez's mood grew dark. Vial wasn't supposed to be cheered on because she had given that savage 2 sons, 2 bastards half Valyrian. They were not dragons, she was, and she was his bride. He would have everyone shout and clamor even louder for when he will take her as bride and give her children. He just had to speak to Roriger. It had been a terrible mistake to let the Valyrian blood be sullied that way. Vial 6. She nodded at her maid as she showed her the robes she was folding for the chest she would be bringing with herself to Harrenhal. It was one of her favorites. It had a clean, northern cut but the puffy sleeves of the southern fashion. Its rim, both on her bosom and on her wrist, was fur-lined with white fur. The color of the gown was a pale gray with lilac veils and white veils and pearls all over her corset. Both Osric and Canleed were asleep in their twins' cribs, the rocking motion keeping to lull them. "Do you want to bring this too, my lady?" asked one of her maids, holding up the black and red gown she had been wearing the day she had arrived in Winterfell. It was mostly red, so she shook her head. "No," she said, "bring the one I was wearing the day of wedding," she ordered, easily folding Brandon's tunics and offering them to the other maid, who put them into his chest. She had already organized the children's chest. She would have rather not bring the children, but her father had wrote to her personally because he wanted to be presented with the children of miracle as he had called them, so she didn't have a choice in the matter, and was happy that despite her initial fear both her boys grew every day stronger and healthier. The boys were now 3 moons old. They were easily lulled back to sleep by their mother's singing or by their father's deep voice. Canleed, true to his name, was the louder and fussier of the 2. He had already started losing the initial shock of dark silver hair. The new ones were looking to be even brighter, not even a couple of tones darker than her own, more silvery than gold, but bright nonetheless, and his eyes had started to settle onto the iron grey of the Starks. Osric instead was the calmer of the 2, thought he also was the one who moved the most of his own. His blue-greyish eyes had started to take a surprising turn, looking to be more purple by the day. Both boys were a perfect mix of their parents. Osric had the dark hair of the Starks and their long face, but he had her button nose and it looked like he would inherit her eyes. Canleed instead had inherited her shock of silver gold hair and her moon-shaped face, but his nose was the long one that Brandon and the rest of the Starks sported, and his eyes looked every day more grey. They were perfect. The birth had been terrifying, especially since it had begun sooner than she had expected. She knew there were 2 of them because Leif and Mahonia had told her. But it had scared her nonetheless. The pain after Osric was born almost unbearable. But it had been worth of it in the end because her sons, her precious sons, were amazing. And growing stronger by the day. To her peace of mind, Maester Warlers had offered to accompany them to Harrenhal, and since Leif did not want to leave the north, like most of the children of the forest, but was more than able to replace the missing Maester for the couple of months that he would away, so the children could be properly looked after during the journey. They spent the whole afternoon preparing the chests and everything they would bring with themselves. Ned, who she had found terribly endearing with his somber demeanor but easy smile, as well as Lyanna and Benjen, would accompany them. Lyanna was somewhat less than abroad with it because she was sent under the guise for her suitor, Robert Baratheon, to know her better before the betrothal was finalized. So she was less than appealed by the idea of going south. Though she was excited to see a real Tony. Benjen was quite happy too to finally be able to explore a bit of the world. As evening grew near and as she rocked Osric in her arms after she had nursed him, Brandon barged in the room, stopping short when he saw he had almost woke up the almost sleeping Osric. Vial sent him a smile, and gingerly rocked her son back and forth until he was soundly asleep, at which point she put him back in his crib, giving it a gentle push so that it kept rocking. Brandon walked behind her, snugly embracing her from behind, his lips against her shoulder. "He is so lucky," he murmured, "they both are. To have you for a mother." He pressed a kiss to her shoulder that had her melt against his strong arms. When she had set out from King's Landing she had been anxious, especially when they had discovered her husband-to-be was considered lucky to not have yet sired a bastard, for his love of women was well renowned. "We've been lucky," she countered, "to have them as children," she added, softly caressing Osric's dark head. Brandon smiled against her skin. "We can choose not to go," he told her as he watched preoccupation mar her brow as small Conlead started to fuss while still asleep and rattling a bit as he breathed. Leaf had told her it was nothing too serious and would resolve itself as he grew, and though Vial could see the betterment day after day, she was still anxious. "My father has demanded our presence," she reminded him, "and the children's." "I don't care," Brandon replied. "If you don't want to go, we won't go." Vial rolled her eyes and turned in his embrace, bringing her arms around his neck and playing with the hair at the nape of his neck. She stood on her tiptoes to press a kiss to his lashes. "I'm serious, Bunnerman," he told her. "If your father has something to say about it, I will tell him." "What will you tell him, Nunazokla?" Brandon leaned down and captured her lips in a feather-like kiss. "I will tell him, listen here, old man, if my wife says no, no it is." It made Vial giggle and Brandon's eyes sparkled with mirth, then his gaze darkened and he leaned down, his hand fisting around his waist and into the fabric of her dressing gown, bringing her flush against his chest as he guided his lips over hers, claiming them with unyielding passion as he deepened the kiss and carded a hand in her hair, wore in a messy bun at the nape of her neck, the hairpin she was wearing scattering to the ground with a clang, unheard by them as Brandon pressed himself against her. He was already half hard in his breeches and Vial could feel the warmth pouring in her belly. Though Maester Wallace had recommended at the very least they did not resume the marital activities at the very least until they returned from Harrenhal, Leaf and Mahonia had begrudgingly agreed, though they had recommended no more than 5 moons instead of the 7 Maester Wallace had told them to wait. But in that moment neither Vial nor Brandon cared, so whisked away by their passion they were. Vial missed her husband's touch on her skin, though he touched and devoured her more than once since she had gave birth. She missed his presence inside of her. Conlead's cries, probably woken by the falling of her hairpin to the floor, broke them apart as her silver-haired child wailed as if his life depended on it. It always happened and went on in the evenings. Leaf had told her it was nothing to fear about, simply the child ingested too much air while nursing and he had bellyaches in the evenings. They broke apart and Vial scooped her child up, easily balancing him on her arm, belly down and gently drumming with her hand against his chubby behind, rocking him as his wails died down a bit. She smiled at Brandon as he chocked out a groan, evidently displeased at having been interrupted. Her husband smiled right back at her and pressed a kiss to her forehead and that of his son. She was happy, happier than she'd ever thought she'd be. Nothing could harm her happiness now. Notes. Suuu. A small communication of service. Yesterday I finally graduated from university, so one would suppose you'd have the summer free. Think again. Today I received the news that I could take part of a test to further education I have been saving up for since a couple of years. Long story short, I have to prepare for this test and study were hard, so I will be able to update this only once in a month, but I promise I will try to keep the updates steady. Anyway. As always, let me know what you think of it. Sending all my love. G. Chapter 19, The Protector of the Realm and Brandon v. Part I. Summary. The court is moving to Harrenhal. The north is moving to Harrenhal. Notes. Enjoy. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. The Protector of the Realm. He surveyed with quiet, reserved eyes as the two princes mingled in the crowd of the court. They had departed from King's Landing a week prior and they were now halfway to Maidenpool. News of Princess Avilia's success in birthing the heir to Winterfell, not one but two heirs, had reached his ears almost as soon as it had happened. Tale of how the Starks must have mingled with old magic to have her carry 2 heirs to full term when her constitution could provide only 4 daughters was one he disregarded easily. It was more probable for the Maester to have made a mistake the king had easily fixed by burning 2 of them, and the Great Maester. Only Pycelle had remained, and the man had been promptly elevated at Great Maester since he had been the only one to admit the girl may carry sons as well when the time had been right, well before the king had gave her as bride to the north. Eris gave a laugh that silenced the whole court. Princess Elia and Queen Rolla were both absent. The queen was still recovering from the king's furious love-making, raping, after he had worked himself to such a state that he had spent several hours in his wife's chamber the week prior, back in King's Landing with her 3rd son, while Princess Elia was with her small court in the apartments they had given her with both her children. Viserys was the first one to join him in his laugh, following the father's lead as if both were laughing at some kind of hidden hilarity only they understood. Roriger, who once would have laughed to keep up appearances, looked at his father with clear disdain in his purple eyes. Finally it was time. He had been the first to suggest to the prince to exercise caution after the Ninepenny incident. The king was paranoid and growing even more so by the day. Prince Viserys was a masterful manipulator, and he was as cruel as Maegor had been and as unable to see the things for what they truly were as his father. Prince Baelor had no interest in ruling, all he cared for was the faith and knighthood. Was it for him he would have become a septon already, but his father had forbidden it. Young Aenys, now on his way to be 6 and 10, was gravitating carefully away from both brothers as if counting his cards before playing his hand. He still did not know where the prince's coin had landed. By all accounts he was kind and generous of disposition, and Queen Rolla tried to shelter him as much as she could from his father, yet the last accounts he had been brought had been concerning. And while he had partook only once with his father and his horse, the young boy was known for his near obsession to have Princess Avalia as his bride. There had been a time in which he would have even suggested such a thing to the king, with Prince Roriger permission and under the condition Aenys had to swear fealty to Roriger as his vassal when the time came. Otherwise many could use the pureness of Aenys and Avalia's children to forward the two to the throne, especially since the princess, though thought of frail health, was good of disposition and would make a fine queen. Prince Roriger was promising, much more than Viserys and Baelor, and for now more than Aenys, yet Princess Elia had given him a son with the Valyrian look as well, save for his olive skin, a son healthy as robust. Even if she was not able to give him any more children, it would be difficult to set her aside. Had she given him another stillborn or lost the babe, or even give him a daughter, Roriger could have easily set her aside or taken a second wife, his sister for sure, now that it was proved she could bear a living son, even 2. Instead Elia Martell had succeeded against all the odds staked against her and had managed to give him an heir. They could not risk the wrath of Dawn now. The perfect endgame for the realm would have been Prince Roriger on the Iron Throne, Princess Elia in Dragonstone with her daughter, and Princess Avalia as Prince Roriger, true queen and wife, a flock of Valyrian-looking children to learn from their parents to be noble and valiant, like Roriger, and kind and fair, like Princess Avalia. Yet unless something befell Princess Elia, nothing of the sort could happen. Neither could they claim the babe to be born of another seed, since he had the Valyrian look, unless they managed to frame another of the princes for it. If it came to it, they would anything necessary. After a Princess Avalia's marriage to the young Lord Stark would be easy to annul, especially as Tale wanted it. It had been celebrated only in the eyes of the old gods and not in the light of the Seven. It'd be easy to break such a marriage bond, especially with the realm's future at stake. Great houses had mottos. He had one as well. Whatever it takes, were his words. Words he lived to by heart. Words he would stand true in the coming future. Have the preparations made, Varys. King Aerys ordered of him. We have a dragon to bring be back into the fold. The eunuch bowed his head, his hands folded into his sleeves. As you command, my king, he offered. Aerys gave another hysterical laugh. If I may be so bold, your grace, he asked, which prince do you want to bless with the gift of your daughter as a bride? Aerys' purple eyes were suspicious when they fit on him. Varys bowed his head again. I ask through no interest of my own, my king, he assured. I must know as traitors flock to you, and I shall know how to prepare according to which prince. Aerys seemed calmed by his justification. I shall yet decide, he said, save for Roriger. I have decided to let the fate decide for me, he added. Baelor is where he should be, in King's Landing with his mother, he said, while whoever of my sons shall win the tourney will be given my daughter as bride. I'd rather not give her to my heir, my Viserys, he added, for she is unpure now that she has been in bed of that savage, yet, she could prove useful indeed if she were to birth him heirs. Inez would do anything to have her. He laughed maniacally. I shall see, I shall see. He knew that the king wanted to name Viserys his heir, had meant to do so when Rhaegar had sent word that his wife was again with child, and had to put the plan on hold, knowing no one would accept Viserys now that Rhaegar had a son and heir, not unless Viserys proved himself by marrying preferably a high Valyrian lady who gave him Valyrian-looking sons. Aerys' plan had been to frame the Starks and bring back his daughter to King's Landing. Sadly it could not work, not when the Starks were considered between the most truthful houses of the realm, as they had always stood by House Targaryen through peace and bloodshed. Then, his pyromancer, always more than glad with seeing people burn in the holy wildfire as he called it, had suggested the king that his treacherous heir would now move for the throne, and since Rhaegar had been the one to convince the king not to go to the tourney, the king had immediately been abroad with the idea and had decided to go to Harrenhal himself in hope not only to get back his daughter but also expose his firstborn so that he could easily name Viserys his heir. Now, though, it looked like the king was entertaining the thought of having the princess married to Inez instead, which would explain why the young prince was being overly careful before taking a side between his brothers. This did not bode too well. Varys had made sure that the great Maester Pycelle, who had now gained quite the authority on matters of womanly fertility, started to insinuate the doubt that Princess Elia could no longer bear children in Prince Rhaegar's ear. He knew the prince would likely not set her aside after she had given him his son, especially if she were to give him another child, even a girl, for he was much convinced he was supposed to have 3 children, 2 daughters and a son. Yet if she were to prove unable to give him other children, he could be easily swayed to take Princess Avalia, and if she managed to give him his so long wanted